Sword of Coming Chapter 1029. After drinking the wine, Lu Qin threw the empty wine bottle into the stream outside the window, and drifted away with the water. No accident, it would be picked up by a new river downstream who knew the goods and put it in his pocket. Yu Gaojiu and the young hidden official are drinking friends, and Qin Pingan and I are Taoist friends, so we are like friends who have never been masked. A meeting ceremony that can refine water transportation is not a respect. Turning around and laughing with Ningji, Mr. Qin is about to teach a book. You go to the school with me first and have a look at some interesting things. There was a string of bells hanging under the eaves outside the house, and a long rope hung down. The end of the rope was about the same height as Qin Pingan's outstretched arm. Zhang Jiaolu really owed his hands, so he was going to ring the bell, but Ningji stopped him. Lu Qin laughed. They can't hear except you and me. Seeing that the young man insisted on his own opinion, Lu Qin had to give up, and took the young man to look at another object and asked if he knew what it was. Ningji couldn't explain it clearly, so Lu Qin began to introduce it. It turned out that Qin Pingan was outside the school and made a simple sundial with his own hands. It was engraved with the characters of the 12 earthly branches, and used the shadow of the sun to time the time. There are 12 hours in a day and 1 hour is 8 quarters. It's just that it's impossible to confirm the time on rainy days, so Qin Pingan asked Zhao Xuxia to say hello to himself at some important nodes and remind him. Lu Qin stretched out a finger, pressed the sun shadow on the sundial, and began to move. The sun shadow moved quickly with the fingers of Master Lu. Ningji turned his head to look at the school subconsciously. The scene in the house was like a book that turned pages quickly. When Lu Qin retracted his finger, the picture was frozen and everything returned to normal. Then Lu Qin walked into Qin Pingan's house. Although Ningji was curious, he just stood at the door. Unable to stop this headmaster Lu, the young man could always suppress his curiosity. Lu Qin looked at the stacks of books on the table, at least half of them were the first drafts compiled by Qin Pingan himself, and smiled knowingly. It seemed that Qin Pingan was in this village school and used it as a beginner's book for the opening of the school, not only under the mountain. The General 300,000 and Dragon When Whip Shadow, Young Learning Qianglin, these are the common Mongolian books of the mountain school. Walking in the long river of time, the young man who was swimming in the water didn't realize it, and he didn't even feel dizzy. From this, it can be seen that the tenacity of Ningjia's skin is extremely outstanding. Lu Qin walked out of the room, shook his wrist, held a pocket sundial in his palm, and handed it to Ningji. Next, it's up to you to control the speed of the passage of time. Ningji shook his head. Lu Qin smiled and said, Ningji, remember a truth: whether you have it or not, and whether you use it or not, are two different things. It's a world of difference. Ningji hesitated and thanked Zhang Jiao. The young man carefully took the sundial, which was a little lighter than expected. Then Ningji asked, Master Lu, can you make sure Qin goes slower or go back? Lu Qin secretly praised the young man's inference, nodded, and said indifferently, Of course, it is a trick of carving insects that on the mountain will know. The young man smacked his tongue incessantly. Are all the gods on the mountain so powerful? Lu Qin rejoiced in misfortune, since most of them are not his direct disciples anyway, so it is a good idea to cheat. One day in the future, when the young man finds out that Qin Pingan can't even control a long river of time, then his eyes will be wide open, and when Lu Qin thinks about this scene now, he finds it interesting, exciting, and very interesting. In the school, some children's hands and nails were full of dirt. There are also poor families, calloused hands at a young age, no shoes, or slightly better, put on a new pair of shoes when they enter school. There is that person who is naturally active, like someone who doesn't have a long butt. In class, he either likes to be swayed or he likes to tease the adjacent table. Standing at the door, Ningji was a little afraid to enter the school. Lu Qin stood aside, put one leg up on the windowsill, and bent over to press his leg there. Ningji asked in a low voice, Why doesn't Taoist Wu use his real name? He never dared to speak in a normal voice. The young man always felt that it would disturb Wu Daicheng's lectures. Lu Qin smiled and said, This habit is not very good, it's not fair enough. When you walk around the world, you don't say yes, you don't change your name, you don't change your surname. As a friend, you have to persuade Qin Pingan well when you go back to the poor road. Wu Di, the homonym, is invincible. The origin of this pseudonym is that he once visited the Suoyun sect together with a good friend back then. Over there, he made up his mind temporarily, calling himself Xuanhuan, the road name invincible, saying that he likes to walk straight, and let Suoyunzong block the ancestral mountain on the road, move the top of the mountain. Listen and see, what are you? Suo Yunzong's concierge, do you want to hit someone when you hear this kind of bastard? Ningji said, Wu Daochang always has his reasons for doing things. Lu Qin smiled knowingly. It's a coincidence his friend's name is Lu Jinglong and he was called his disciple at that time, and he changed his name together. He has no Taoist name yet, so he is called Lu Dao. A person who will believe that good people are rewarded for the rest of their lives. Xuanhuan Lu Dao, who is very patient in reasoning, firmly believes that he can always make sense with others, if he focuses on the key points. Isn't he a good person who can reason well? In this way it is indeed a beautiful vision. Ningji said, Master Lu is traveling abroad, so he doesn't need a pseudonym? Lu Qin interlaced his hands and fingers, held it high above his head, pressed his legs sideways over there repeatedly, and said with a smile, Pin Dao is out of the house and prefers to use his real name, but most people have heard of it, even if they know that there is such a thing as Lu Qin in the world. The number of people must not be taken seriously. Some people have heard that as long as the poor don't want them to think more, they can't think more about by Yujing and Zhangjiao Lu. There are a handful of monks on the mountain, more it's a long-acquainted friend, so it doesn't matter if you hide your identity. As for the origin of the traces, Lu Qin pointed to the willow in the distance. Look, every winter and spring come, the willow branches are newly turned and the scenery is old. The old traces, the traces of the past that have passed away, have a bit of sadness and nostalgia. Life going around is like grinding a cow, stepping on the old traces step by step. Go and don't repeat the words, the bitterness is too sad. Speaking of this, Lu Qin was proud, squinting and smiling. If you read more in the future, you will find an interesting thing. If you really have to worry about it, the phrase, Qinji, actually originated from Pindo's Tian Luck. Ningji, let me tell you a word without bragging. In the past 6,000 years in several worlds, no matter who or what Dao origin, as long as you have a little knowledge, each family will write books and make statements. The characters who are mentioned most in the books, if there are any, if you can make a summary of the good people, then the Pindao does not say that it is firmly at the top of the list, and it is definitely among the top 3. Even in the Buddhist koan, there are many quotes from the Pindao which are used to beat the machine. Having said that, Lu Qin patted his stomach and said, The biggest meal in the world is the biggest, are you hungry? Just as Ningji was about to shake his head, his stomach gurgled in disgrace, as if Taoist Lu had reminded him, and the young man realized his hunger. Lu Qin put away his legs and ran to the yellow mud stove that was also used as a pile of debris and where the warrior Zhao Shuxia laid the ground floor. After handing a bowl of wontons to Ningji, Lu Qin sat on the threshold of the stove with a celadon jug at his feet, which contained the bayberry shochu made last year. Tapped the mouth of the bowl with chopsticks and asked with a smile, Ningji, do you think reading can be eaten as a meal? The young man squatted aside, holding a bowl in one hand and chopsticks in one hand. Hearing Dao Changlu's question, he quickly swallowed the wonton in his stomach and said, The world is better now. Lu Qin put down his chopsticks like flying, devoured it, picked up the last wonton from the bowl and said with a smile, In the past there was a very powerful Taoist cultivator on your side of Aquarius, a sword cultivator with a clear mind. His name is Li Tuanjing. He has a very interesting saying that in today's world the reason why Qi practitioners are masters in the mountains is that God enjoys eating, and Qi practitioners are the bowl which seems to be the biggest. The food in the bowl, but it turned the wontons into the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. If God changed the method at the beginning, for example, who is the best at weaving straw shoes, who is the best in craftsmanship, and who is the uncle, then it will be a different situation. Ningji wondered, what did Dao Master Lu tell me about these big truths? After drinking the remaining soup in the bowl, Lu Qin burped, put the empty bowl beside his feet, put his chopsticks on the bowl, picked up the pot of green plum shochu, and took a gulp of spirits. The Taoist shivered and laughed. Dao, we always do too much and think too little. We eat too much and we have nothing to do. So in the eyes of the poor Taoist master, what is a Taoist? Only you have more than enough to serve the world. Ningji asked tentatively, Is it like I'm hungry but am empty-handed, and Taoist Lu is kind enough to make a bowl of wontons for me to eat? Lu Qin snorted and said in surprise, Is the young man so enlightened? Ningji hesitated for a moment, but the ingredients and the kitchen are from Dao Changwu. Lu Qin suddenly burst into laughter and finally managed to restrain his smile, raised his head and drank the bayberry soju, then turned his head and blinked at the young man. Then you feel that you are in between being hungry and having a full meal, and you are in a poor way to the end. What have you done? Ningji subconsciously glanced at the empty bowl beside Lu Daocheng's feet and the pair of chopsticks placed on top, then looked at the bowl and chopsticks in his hands. The teenager shook his head, always feeling that the answer in his heart was wrong after all. Lending money is like giving and collecting debt is like collecting. Lu Qin smiled and said, It has been natural since ancient times. Ningji didn't think much about it. Anyway, he didn't understand. He just put away Dao Changlu's bowls and chopsticks, walked into the stove, cleaned them first, and then put the bowls and chopsticks back into the cabinet and bamboo tube. Lu Qin wrapped his arms around his sleeves and turned his head to stare at the blue shirt on the school's side. The school starts on time every day in the middle of the hour, and the early class is endorsed for 2/4 of an hour. Children who are late will be punished. They will stand in the classroom and stand against the wall. If there are too many times, they will be hit by a wooden board and eaten 3 times. Among them, Mengtong, who are playful, forgetful, and have not completed their schoolwork, have a table and stool behind them, in addition to the penalty stand and the ruler, so that they can use it to make up their schoolwork before returning to their seats. The seats in the school are divided into 3 columns according to age groups, namely 6 to 8 years old, 8 to 10 years old, and 10 years old and above. More than a dozen children, each with its own desk and bench. Because there are not many students, it is not crowded. Qin Pingan sat on a chair opposite the Meng children. He seemed to close his eyes and rest in peace, but in fact he listened carefully to the different reading sounds of the 3 children. Lu Qin smiled and asked, "Ningji, do you know what the sound of a book is?" The young man shook his head. A reader is a reader, and reading is naturally read out word by word. Lu Qin leaned his back against the windowsill with his arms wrapped around his sleeves and explained with a smile. The original meaning is the sound of gold and stone hitting each other, the quality is like a clear chime, the sound is like a solitary tree, the sound is sloping and the rocks are rocky. Later generations felt that the meaning of this stack of words is real. Beautiful, it is used to describe a good reading sound, and now it is. For 3 different age groups, Qin Pingan will teach different levels of homework. For example, in the teaching of the school yesterday and the endorsement this morning, if the child feels that he is familiar with the memorization, he can raise his hand to indicate that Qin Pingan will let him go to his side and check it again. Meng Tong repeated the rough text of the paragraphs he had memorized by himself. At that moment, it seemed that the identities of the teacher and the student were reversed. If it is clear and generally correct, Qin Pingan will nod his head and let the child return to his seat. If Meng Tong's endorsement is accurate, the text is still not accurate enough, or the content is missing, Qin Pingan will help to correct it and check for omissions. Fill in the gaps and then let the child go back and continue to recite. In the past few days, Lu Qin, who has not been bothering Ningji to watch the scenes of time, finally opened his mouth and reminded, "Ningji, don't underestimate the part of Meng Tong's retelling. This is the essence of both teaching and studying. In the future, when the students walk out of the school, whether they can start their careers and even whether they can make a difference, come out of their own way and speak on behalf of the sages, this is all in one fell swoop." The teacher taught the book to Meng Tong's endorsement, and then to the reversed lecture the student taught, the teacher listened. There is a sequence here, there is a sequence. This is to know the reason and to know the sequence, then the approach is close. Ningji said, "Master Lu is at Baiyujing and he will give lectures too, right?" Lu Qin smiled, "Too lazy to do it occasionally. There are too many smart people on the 12th floor of Baiyujing 5 City, and almost none of them are stupid, which is the reason why I don't want to preach. In terms of the breadth and depth of knowledge for thousands of years in the world, apart from the number of people with a few hands, the gap between everyone and Lu Qin is just 1 Lu Qin." Ningji didn't think too much about it, he just thought that the immortals of Baiyujing were so smart that they didn't need to attend lectures. In fact, it is just the opposite. Just as Lu Qin once joked with Qin Pingan, Shui Dongshan's sleeve is called beating the stupid place, and his sleeve belongs to the smart place in the world. After the end of the morning class endorsement, the next is the daily formal class. Qin Pingan led the Meng children to read the Book of Life, for about half an hour. There were 3 columns of students and the content of the reading was different. From the lowest to the highest, Qin Pingan came in order. The other 2 Meng Tong can read the book by themselves or read new books by themselves, but their voices should not be too loud. Read it 100 times and read it 100 times. Of course, you can also listen to the teacher's lectures. For example, 6 or 7-year-old children, as long as they are interested, can listen to the teacher's homework for students over 10 years old. Generally speaking, in rural villages, families do not have too high expectations for their children to go to school. They just want their children to learn some words in the future, to be able to keep accounts, and to write a few couplets during Chinese New Year. Therefore, the general school teachers usually follow the steps step by step, asking the children to read and recite and learn to write. There are printed copies and copybooks specially used to trace read and postscripts. Over time, students can get rid of their own writing, and the master will teach the brushwork. In addition to the Confucian classics officially recognized by the Confucian Temple and the imperial court, he will also read ancient texts. At this time you can start learning how to write. In the countryside, the conditions are simple, and if you only talk about writing lessons, you can only do it mostly with charcoal or with stones similar to yellow mud to write on a thin blue stone board of moderate size. It is convenient for repeated use, or the wooden sand table is filled with a layer of fine sand from the streams and rivers, and the branches or cut bamboo are used as pens. Just like here, there is a green bamboo pen holder on each desk, which is filled with thin bamboo pens, and a square wooden box sand tray is placed in the desk drawer. There is also a thick booklet the size of a slab with an odd title. It is Fu Er Shu, which is more than 3,000 characters selected by Qin Pingan from 300,000 other Enlightenment books, and each character is divided into several contents. Small capital letters indicate pronunciation, word meaning, and several common phrases. Ningji was a little envious of the book Fu Er Zi, and Zhang was very understanding, so the young man had another book in his hand in addition to the pocket sundial. The boy asked, "Do you have to recognize so many words before leaving the school?" Lu Qin smiled and said, "Of course, as long as you can recognize 3,000 or 4,000 words. What book can't you read in the future?" The boy asked again, "Can you do it?" Lu Qin said, "You can definitely do it. As for a child in this school who is studying hard, even if he is 6 years old, he can learn for 5 or 6 years. Indeed, it is difficult to say that it belongs to Meng Tong who is not suitable for studying by nature." The young man hesitated. This day, after school, Mr. Qin and the young man named Zhao Xuxia were eating at the same table, and Zhao Xuxia helped Ningji to ask a question. "What should I do about those Meng Tong who are not enlightened when they read?" Mr. Qin gave an answer with a smile. "Studying is hard, but it is extremely difficult. It is worse than hard work. In a young school career, as long as you learn the word hard work, you will get your true duty and ability. No matter what you do in the future, you will have a skill, but if all your peers endure hardships in the school years, you will lose it early. If you work hard, you will get out of the school in the future. What will you do?" Not to mention everyone, but the vast majority of people are prone to self-suggestion when they encounter difficulties, slack in their hearts, unwilling to insist on something and give up early. This is really the beginning of everything is difficult. At the dinner table, Qin Pingan suddenly asked, "Zhao Xuxia, do you think whether a person works hard is also a talent?" Zhao Xuxia thought about it for a moment, but he still couldn't seem to give an answer. He just said, "Similar in nature but far from each other?" Qin Pingan smiled and nodded. "Teaching is not strict, teachers are lazy. From tomorrow the board will be played harder." Zhao Xuxia held back for a long time and said, "The girls in the school occasionally forget their homework. Why don't they see how the master punishes them? It seems that they haven't even used the ruler. They just went to the back and punished them for a stop as usual, with tears in their eyes. When master saw it, he would immediately soften his heart and quickly find a compromise. He asked them to recite a few sentences and paragraphs, most of which were extremely difficult assignments, and pass the examination. If they do, they will be asked to return to their seats to read." Qin Pingan glared. "They are girls after all, not to mention you said that they just forget their schoolwork occasionally. Can they be like those naughty boys?" Zhao Xuxia was silent, just casually said, "Master, why are you so anxious? After reading raw books every day, the next step is to warm cooked books. Since they were teaching Meng Tong to 3 age groups, it would take about half an hour. As a starting point for young children to learn, Qin Pingan not only taught the 4 books and 5 classics, which was slightly rigid, followed the rules, and taught the content in strict order, in addition to several classics and book passages that he carefully selected and found to be pure and rational. The teaching purpose is naturally to take the most mellow books of the ancients and sages, and to learn from a broad perspective, so these sentences or paragraphs do not need to be so step by step. They are relatively simple and easy to understand. There is also a book of filial piety. In the interval between Wen and familiar books, Qin Pingan will follow certain sentences and make some point-to-point extensions, and emphasize some basic etiquette for children and others with Meng Tong. It's easy to fail in the words of rationality, it's not as good as the words of propriety." Lu Qin sat on the table by the back wall, clasped the back of his head with both hands, smiled and said, "Hundreds of good and filial piety come first. Ningji, have you noticed that there are many local ruffians and rogues who fight and kill outside no matter how much they do? When I get home, I either meet the mouse when I see my father, or I don't dare to be called an unfilial son no matter what the reputation is. There are also some children who were especially naughty when they were studying. The teacher of the teacher will still be respectful, may be willing to pinch the nose, bite the bullet, and obey a few words. Ningji is usually sitting on the bench, sitting upright like a squatting child, listening carefully to Mr. Chen's lectures. Ningji wondered, Master Lu, is it the first course arranged with Mr. Chen, and there is a big discrepancy? Previously, Headmaster Lu showed him a piece of paper that recorded the course schedule in detail. In many places, it was different from the current academic plan that was actually implemented. Lu Chen smiled and said, he was overthrown by himself. To be precise, Qin Pingan was going to take a break, but he probably felt that teaching like this at the beginning was too difficult, and Meng Tong would not be able to keep up with the progress. They can easily lose interest in reading. Although it is a very hard thing to go to school, if a teacher can make Meng Tong feel less boring at the beginning of teaching as much as possible, of course, it is more all right. Lu Chen flipped his wrist and took a book from the desk drawer of Qin Pingan's residence and handed it to Ningji. Look at what's different. Ningji opened the pages of the school's reading book and found that in the margins, next to many words, many annotations were written in teeny small capital letters. The text content is several times larger than the reading itself. Lu Chen smiled and said, this is the book Qin Pingan used to teach. Meng Tong will not know about Mr. Teach's thoughts and skills. Ningji asked curiously, are all teachers in the world like this? Lu Chen said, the mind and the idea are similar, it's just that the time consuming is different and the effort is different. Lu Chen shook his sleeves, threw out a stack of paper and handed it to the young man. This is the sage of Xiaoling, who is not a sage of the Confucian temple, but a sage and masters thus explanation of words. These scattered pages have not yet been compiled into a book, are they? Manuscripts in the true sense are not the so-called manuscripts that will be published later. You keep it, you don't have to return it, how to deal with it in the future, and you don't need to ask the meaning of the poor. Don't be pretentious. Do you think you will be rewarded without merit, Pindao, and you meet by chance, and I will definitely meet again after you come? Except for the student book and the Wenshu book, the difference is not big, only a few book lists have been changed, but after that, the talking book item on the paper was directly deleted by Mr. Chen, and the note was made with a red pen on the paper, put on hold. And the subsequent www. novel. For example, the first course formulated by Mr. Chen, is to read and examine the differences in the governance of a certain person, look at the provincial records and cite examples of dictionaries, 3 pages per week. Zhuzi Primary School 1 page per day, etc. Moreover, in this column Mr. Chen had several signs of changing the number of Zhu pens, and he kept ticking them off and rewriting them. More than once, the result was eventually replaced by Mr. Chen with more simple and superficial books, and one more book was added. The drawing book, of course, is also from Mr. Chen's manuscript book, painting various mountains and rivers, hundreds of techniques, etc., supplemented by words, pictures and texts. Just talking about this book, the front pages are mostly related to rural villages and secular life, such as spring plowing, farming time, grains and various trees and fish. At the same time, the writing class, which is the last item in the morning, has also undergone great changes. For example, the earliest plan for Mongolian children of different school ages is daily writing, cross on the forehead of ancient steles, xuanhuan interpretation of Chinese characters. 3 The characters range from 5 characters to 5, and during the teaching period, the rhythm, exegesis, etc. can be briefly explained. The Book of Filial Piety or the Classic of Huang Ting should be written in block script, in bold pen and written on 2 pages. After that, there was another idea that was finally abandoned by Mr. Chen, that is, to teach Meng Tong to learn to write not from the regular script, but completely according to the origin of the font, starting from the small seal script, then the official script and finally the regular script. As for running script and cursive script as well as the more ancient insect bird seal script, Mr. Chen first commented on the word inappropriate, and then he thought of a few workarounds such as whether to teach only a few words so that people can be confused. Tong knows that there are still these kinds of fonts in the world. The result is still ticked off by the red pen, and Mr. Chen commented again next to it, it's not right to think about it. There is also a stack of paper on the table alone with many notes written on it. For example, regarding filial piety and filial piety, Mr. Chen has written several words to remind himself, and it is obviously his handwriting and experience in different time periods. Should I say no? It is necessary to carefully explain the difference between the two and be cautious. If there is no absolute certainty in the right time, don't mention it. Another example is the sentence, in the world, determination comes first. Then Mr. Chen had a question. Can the determination of young children be divided into levels, sizes and priorities? The master said that when his parents are here, he should not travel far and he must travel well. But when you are with your parents, you must not be ignorant, one is joyful, the other is fearful. Both languages can be explained together. There are still some questions and ideas which are written in teeny small letters or running script, and a whole page of paper is still unfinished, and there are dense texts related to it on the reverse side. There is also a manuscript booklet that has not been used in the school for the time being. It is still handwritten by Qin Pingan. Collected the aphorisms and aphorisms of ancient and modern masters, ancient people's shallow words, good words and deeds, intercepted some popular poems and so on. There is another thin abridged version which is catchy to read because it rhymes and seems to be jingle. In the early years, Qin Pingan went out for a long trip alone, and later on the Tongyi's house side he took Xia Heaton on the night road together and he used it all. All of them are based on the original script of Li Shirlang from the night cruise entry city, picking and choosing and compiled the rhyme. 36 excellent essays by writers of past dynasties dedicated to describing landscapes were selected, and they were divided into 3 volumes by Qin Pingan. Each volume has its own simple and beautiful prose. In the school's calligraphy class, Qin Pingan first taught Mengtong to write their own names. If they had been in a school for a few years before, they learned to write sentences like learn and learn from time to time, otherwise it would be a hall in the village ancestral hall. The numbered plaque and the few couplets. In addition, there are some well-known but easy-to-understand verses, such as raising your head to look at the bright moon, the city springs with deep grass and trees, and the day is full of mountains. The spring is late Huamukiki. While the Mengtong children are burying their heads in writing, the teacher in the Confucian shirt, long coat and cloth shoes walks between the 3 rows of desks with his hands behind his back, occasionally reaching out and twisting the Mengtong's pen tube. If Qin Pingan mentions it lightly, he will remind them to pay attention and learn to concentrate when holding a pen and writing. Or stop and point out that a certain stroke is wrong when the child is writing. When the calligraphy class is over, it is noon and the class ends on time. Mengtong can go home for lunch and have half an hour to spare. If there are only 2 meals a day, morning and evening, just play with each other, climb the tree to catch birds and go down to the river to fish at will. Lu Qin and Ning Ji were like 2 out-and-out outsiders, watching the liveliness of the open space outside the school. Whenever this time, Zhao Shuxia, who looks tall and strong, comes in handy, because the master will ask him to practice a set of boxing techniques. Zhao Shuxia was thin-skinned, but it was actually quite embarrassing at the beginning. The key master also told him to make some noises, the dust was flying and the 2 sleeves were crackling. For those active boys, watching Zhao Shuxia boxing is not much different than following the elders in the family to go to the county town to go to the market, watch the temple fair, or buy New Year's goods during the New Year's Day. And Qin Pingan himself went to the kitchen to eat, holding a bowl, leaning against the door and standing there watching Zhao Shuxia's jokes. There are 3 girls in Mengtong who like to kick the shuttlecock, so Qin Pingan made a few copper coin feather shuttlecocks and a feather duster by the way. Qin Pingan would occasionally call a yellow-faced and thin Mengtong to have lunch together. This child was sitting in the middle of the school, but he looked even shorter and thinner than the 5 or 6-year-old Mengtong who had just entered school. He only called twice and the child was all red. Without nodding his face, Qin Pingan thought about it and stopped insisting. Due to the low tuition fees and the small number of Mengtong children, Qin Pingan built a vegetable garden near the school, surrounded it with a bamboo fence, raised some chickens and ducks and rented it from the villagers at a low price. A small bamboo forest and tea garden, together with Zhao Shuxia, reclaimed wasteland on the mountain, planted some crops such as corn, and planted fruit trees such as peaches and loquats. Originally, Qin Pingan was thinking about whether to make a pigsty and buy 2 piglets. He also thought about planting mulberry trees, but whether raising pigs or silkworms, the smell was heavy, so just think about it. If you really want to improve the food, you can go to the mountain to set up traps and cover, but it is not enough. Let Zhao Shuxia catch the deer and wild boar. Lu Qin leaned against the sundial, stretched out a finger and wrote a word, in the air. The Taoist priest and the young man on the side explained with a smile. The word later evolved into you, which in ancient times means the appearance of wanting to stretch out. In 2 days, there will be an old Taoist immortal who will make a piece that joins the Taoist galaxy. This is the surname of Lao Jinren, and he is used to call him Fu Lu Yuxian on the mountain, which is somewhat similar to Tan Tianzhou, Shu Di Lu of the Yinyang family, and of course Pei Min, one of the 3 great swordsmen. Speaking of this, Lu Qin raised his hand, and in his hand there were 2 more hiking sticks made of green bamboo, which he threw to the boy and said with a smile, "Let's go, I'll show you around the nearby mountains and rivers." Ning Ji stretched out his hand and took the green bamboo stick and said, "Lord Taoist, my foot strength is okay." Lu Qin took the lead to move, walked out of the drying yard on the side of the school, walked along a small road by the stream to the next village and said with a casual smile, Whether it's a literati traveling in the mountains and water, or a literate person who travels the mountains and waters to make a living, when there is always a lack of physical strength, take 10,000 steps back and say, no matter how good a person's legs are, his heart is. Just take it. A young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown hangs a black bag around his waist, poking the ground with a bamboo stick, leisurely. At a young age, in addition to studying and increasing knowledge, you also need to pay attention to a person who cultivates vitality, nourishes the spirit, strengthens the body, and is stable. Physique. Always let the consciousness abdicate and the primordial spirit return. This is what we Taoists call constantly protect the child. As for what is consciousness and what is primordial spirit, if you have the opportunity to practice in the future, you will understand it. Remember to communicate with you. Preacher, please ask one more question: the origin of Yuanshan and Yuanying. In the future, on the way of studying and cultivating the Tao, you will definitely encounter a kind of entangled person. It has nothing to do with good or bad, good or evil, but just unsettled. Knowing that you have done something wrong, you must be willing to say sorry to others, and when you encounter excessive demands from others, you must also dare to say no. Feel free, I am still me, and things turn around, I am who I am. When he came to the stream, Lu Qin washed his face with water. There was an old camphor tree with green shade on the bank. Lu Qin sat on the stone and rested for a while. Said, don't blindly praise the ancients. Blind looking at the ancient books, his eyes slid into the pile of old papers, but he didn't come out, he couldn't come out. Just like Qin Pingan, when reading you must first thicken the book, then thin it, and finally do one thing, and the remaining few words that are in harmony with the book or one or two truths. Any book, whether it is known as 100 Generations Unchangeable Classics, or miscellaneous books that are not orthodox enough, or even considered unpopular, to be able to get one or two truths that truly belong to you is already a rare thing, and it is not considered a free reading. Speaking of this, Lu Qin stretched out his left hand, put his fingers together, twisted and drew a few circles. The young man was horrified to find that the greenness of the shade of the tree had been condensed by the Taoist priest. Lu Qin looked into the stream again. When he hooked his fingers, a wet blue stone jumped out of the water, rubbed it in his right hand, and the crumbs fell, and finally turned into two long strips of turquoise green seals. The Taoist held the seals with his two fingers. Using the fingers of his left hand as a carving knife, he began to engrave the seals, namely, opening the book is beneficial, and Ningji has read it. They handed them over to the young man and smiled. If you come across a good book that you like in the future, you can stamp this on the page. 2 seals. The young man was really happy to see it, so he was welcome and quickly thanked the headmaster Lu. Lu Qin smiled and waved his hand. What are you being polite to the poor Taoist? I really feel sorry for it. On the way to practice in the future, since the registration number, you can add an additional number. In a word, Lu Qin is your little master. Although you and I are the kind of masters and apprentices that are not justifiable, we must remember the past, and we still need to talk about the incense in the past. Afterwards, the young man followed the Taoist priest along the mountain road. There were dark clouds above his head and there were thunderstorms. It looked like it was going to rain. When they came to a top of the mountain, the local people called this place commonly known as Senjiling. In an instant, the rain was majestic and the sky and the earth were dark. Lu Qin handed Ningji an oil paper umbrella. The rain poured down like a gap in the sky. The two stood in place with umbrellas. Lu Qin smiled and said, "What is a perfect person? And the nature stretches without omission. The first-class scholar among the heavens and the earth learns from the word li, or opens up or stabilizes the road, so that the road of the world is not dry and cracked in drought, and not muddy in the rainy season. Just like the road when we came. Second-class scholars spend their whole lives studying the word li, striving to get it right and inheriting the incense of Taoism. It's like the house over there and the umbrella in our hands. Thirdly, studying in the study, reading the scriptures with white heads, and going around on the character can also benefit the context. Just like every 3 or 5 miles, there is a pavilion on the side of the road. The next step is to read a lot of sages and sages, still half a bucket of water, seek benefits and avoid harm, but have no intention of harming others, and are willing to do some good deeds within their ability. The scholars in the world, such people make up 8 or 9 out of 10. The next level is the vulgar and unbearable Confucian, who is sane, old-fashioned and pedantic. The greater the harm to the world. It's like a certain kind of person said in a Buddhist scripture, who enters my law and lives in my monastery, and destroys my righteousness. Soybean-sized raindrops made the oil paper umbrella tremble. Ningji vaguely saw that among the muddy mountain roads in the distance, someone was walking fast and came here. The teenager has a good memory and is good at capturing details. He is keen to discover that the xianxia who came here by the mountain is not the xianxia of today. Lu Qin said, "Xianxia came here to practice boxing. At the school you are constrained by your hands and feet. This boxing move can't be used and the movement of punching is too loud. Chuiyu has a boxing method called Yunjian style." Sure enough, then Zhao Shu came down to the top of the mountain, stood on his feet, sighed in his dantian, opened his boxing frame and started throwing punches towards the sky. Lu Qin and the young man explained, "This boxing has a great origin. There is an old man named Chui who belongs to the Confucian scholar of Yaxing. He reads a lot. One day he saw an allusion of the barnyard official's wild history in the book. After several years of drought, the people were struggling to survive. There was a female rain teacher who took pity on the common people and did not hesitate to violate the laws of heaven and rained rain on the world without authorization. As a result, she was punished by the heavenly court, and her golden body was detained on the platform of the gods. Breaking the golden body, and then demoting her to the mortal world, it is said that in the edict of the Emperor Xin, there is a phrase self-inflicted. When the old man surnamed Chui saw this, he was full of resentment and anger. It happened to be the plum season and it was raining heavily outside the house. He went out and got such a punch. Ningji looked up at the sky subconsciously and asked, "Master Lu, is this really the case?" Lu Qin smiled and said, "I'm tired and lazy and my technique is not good. I don't dare to wait to the time before 10,000 years, so I don't dare to say whether this is true or not." The clay bottle alley boy from Lizidongshan, the kiln worker Sissy, and Shui Qing who later entered the unfortunate Mangosteen, I believe that the three of them would never have imagined that they would be connected in a strange way. A pouring downpour as if the gods were pouring ink on the world, coming and going quickly. After Zhao Shuxia handed out a dozen punches he was exhausted. He took a short rest, held his breath and walked down the mountain to return to the school. Lu Qin then took Ningji to another hill called Wuanai Tan. The fish in the pond was different from other places. The crucian carp and lochir both had a golden thread on their bodies. This is also a place to pray for rain during severe droughts. Elderly villagers and sages need to fast for 3 days in the ancestral hall, and then go up the mountain to pray for rain. It often rains before the team returns to the village. Signs very effective. Ningji asked, "Did the rain master who was banished from the sky to the mortal world live here?" Lu Qin smiled and said, "It's impossible to say, who knows. The local folklore and local county annals only say that it is related to the genus of a passing dragon, and does not mention the rain master." In the afternoon of the school, classes start at midnight, and when the application period ends, Mengtong can be considered dismissed from school. One day almost 3.5 hours. In addition to the daily classes, the school also has 3 monthly classes every month. On a certain afternoon when the get out of class ends half an hour early from the time of application, it is usually Qin Pingan who teaches Mengtong additional reading and writing classes. Classmate books, in addition to Mongolian school textbooks, have no academic requirements. Qin Pingan will come up with more than a dozen books of different categories, involving phonology, gold and stone, heaven and water, laws and regulations, etc., and let the children read it by themselves. If there are problems you can ask him about uncommon words or the semantics of a certain sentence. Qin Pingan will also take out some real objects and put them on the table, similar to a few steel inscriptions that can be bought anywhere in general bookstores, a few square seals carved by himself, porcelain, etc. So that Mengtong has the most intuitive impression. Know what a what is. Then there are some busy farming seasons and the rural school will only have half-day classes. The teacher would also help with the field work, so some old people would get together behind their backs and laugh a few words, similar to Mr. Qin doing farm work. In order to grab water, there are frequent quarrels and fights between the upper and lower villages, and large-scale armed fights are possible, but as long as no casualties are caused, the county town generally ignores these. Almost all the villages under the school surnamed Qin, and the largest Wuxi village at the entrance of the mountain call, the two sides fought the most fiercely for water. Not long ago there was a fierce fight. Almost all the young people in the two villages participated, because there is a child here at the school, and his father is among them. This seemingly dull and sullen guy is ruthless. It is estimated that Wuxi village knows the root and the bottom. Several people beat him. Originally he was squatting in the distance. Qin Pingan, who was watching the excitement, saw that the man was knocking over the ground with a shoulder pole, so he had to trot all the way, and among the sticks and hose, he found an opportunity to help the fallen man and ran away. A few women in Wuxi village, I don't know whether they think the teacher is really unbeatable, or whether they think that the man in the blue shirt and the cloth shoes is different from the ordinary peasant man who is tired of watching. They go up to block the road while laughing. The oil ran fast, but it was the man, gasping for breath, just nodding to the teacher, the country villagers, polite words, not very expressive, just grinning. The eyes of the simple man were full of thanks, and then in the local dialect, he scolded the mother-in-law in the neighboring village and strode back to the battlefield. The next day, when the two old masters from Wuxi village heard about this, they cursed at the wine table. For that little tuition fee, this child really doesn't want any face. At that time, outside the battlefield, Taoist priests and teenagers squatted by the roadside, eating melon seeds and watching a play. Lu Qin smiled and said, "It's the same up and down the mountain. It's just two important things. You can beat it and you can run away." Ningji was puzzled and couldn't help but ask, "Master Lu, isn't Mr. Chen a cultivator?" Lu Qin said, "I'm learning from someone." Ningji stopped meeting with Headmaster Lu now and asked curiously, "Who is someone?" Lu Qin smiled and said, "He is to Qin Pingan just as Qin Pingan is to you. As for who this person is, you don't need to know for the time being." In this Yenzhou prefecture there are several customs. In some rural villages, it is often paid by the clan temple to invite the opera troupe to dance a bamboo horse. Stringing colorful bells, beating gongs and drums, begging for good omens, it was extremely lively, and the children were just behind the bamboo horse team making noises almost like a festival. In addition, there are often two villages where men and women marry each other and become married, which is called kinship. In the first month of every year, even if they are far apart, they will go to each other's ancestral hall to worship incense, set off firecrackers, and then go to each other's ancestral hall to worship incense and set off firecrackers. Have a local meal. Just like the village in the middle, it is a relative of a large village dozens of miles away. Every time it fights for water with the crowded Wuxi village or encounters a dispute, and is at a disadvantage and is bullied, there will be incidents that night. The villagers went to the top of the mountain to light a bonfire. The next day there would be a large group of people in the relative village. Before dawn, they prepared their own rations for the day and rushed to this place. Without a word, they went straight to the ancestral hall in Wuxi village. Lu Qin once took the teenager out on a far journey, and saw with his own eyes the erection and movement of some prefecture county boundary monuments. The teenager was also in a certain dynasty. On the lunar day of each month, there were old blind men holding mudwa. On the road there is a kind of church people's list, most of which are concise and to the point, often only a few sentences, no more than 30 words. Chief Lu will explain the pros and cons of a country's laws, imperial edicts, local village conventions and clan rules with the boy. In the school there is a child who is often beaten. His family is in the village and belongs to the kind of relatively well-off family. The child didn't say anything, and when he got home he didn't complain. It was estimated that the parents and elders saw the red and swollen palms of their own children, and immediately became unhappy. "Children, I will not study in this school in the future." The gentleman didn't say anything, just nodded in agreement. As a result, the couple walked on the front foot, and the child sneaked to the school, his face flushed. Mr. Chen patted his head and said with a smile, "If you make mistakes in the future, you will still be beaten by Mr. will be lighter." The child grinned, scratched his head and said nothing. Every day after school and get out of class, Qin Pingan often goes fishing by the stream, and he can also let Zhao Shu cook and set up a small stove for dinner. There are a few Mingtong who are not good at reading every day and seem not to work very hard. They dared to go fishing with their husband. One of them was a tall man who did not wear shoes all the year round. Before leaving, a long string of stream fish probably wanted to be secretly put into the fish basket of the husband. Maybe he was thin-skinned and didn't dare to do so, so he deliberately threw it near the fish basket and ran away. Qin Pingan was not polite, and threw the string of stream fish into the fish basket. As a result, in the early morning of the next day, the child didn't turn in his schoolwork, and he still suffered a slap in the face, grinning in pain. So the child was hit with another chestnut, and the pain was so painful that he held his head on the spot. The husband raised his face and lowered his voice to teach a lesson. He has a lot of fishing skills. "Do you remember the several kinds of fish on the page of the picture book?" The child shook his head with a face, but he didn't lie. He honestly said that he knew the fish in the picture, but he couldn't recognize the characters next to him. The husband laughed and scolded, "Can't remember eating? Why is it so bright when fishing? Is it more difficult to recognize a few words in a book that can't move, than to catch so many fish that swim around?" In class this day the child will focus exclusively on those few pages of pictures and words and ignore the rest. Qin Pingan didn't care when he saw him deserting. There was also that young boy who was in a rush to urinate in class, but he didn't dare to talk to his husband, so he wet his pants in the classroom. After being discovered, the hall burst into laughter, and the husband signaled everyone to be quiet. He personally took the child to wash his pants by the stream, so that he would be more courageous in the future. He raised his hand in class, and then hinted at the gentleman with his eyes, without saying anything. Mr. will find an excuse to let him leave the school. When a child went to school he was sullen, and the husband asked him what was wrong. The child said that he reasoned with his parents yesterday and he got a big mouth. Qin Pingan asked the child what the reasoning was. The Mengtong, who had learned and applied the truth from the book, twitched. Qin Pingan held back his laughter and comforted a few words. When the class started that day, all the children found that the teacher was always smiling, much more than before. There is a taciturn Mengtong. He lives alone in a village on the mountain. The so-called village is actually only a few households, so he has to walk several miles of mountain roads every day to go to school and after school. No matter how heavy the rainstorm is, this child is never late. Qin Pingan knew that there is a section of road along the mountain, which is extremely narrow. In heavy rain there are often flash floods. If you accidentally fall into the flood, it will be unimaginable, so Zhao Xuxia will let Zhao Xuxia every rainy day, if the child happens to be going to school or after school, just quietly escorted for a ride. After the next month's class, Qin Pingan smiled and said that he went up the mountain with Mengtong. The children who came and went like a fly were probably the slowest, walking next to the gentleman holding a green bamboo stick. Now, at the door of his house in the dark of night, the child hesitated several times. He probably wanted to invite the husband to sit and have a meal, but the family was too poor to speak. Qin Pingan said with a smile that he had to have a cheeky meal with you. In the dark room he had a meal with the family and drank some local shochu. The teacher left drunk, but the child secretly sent him a lot. A long night road. Recently, Qin Pingan began to collect prefaces and postscripts of various poems and articles. Qin Pingan also prepared some paper and pen and ink, including red paper for writing spring festival couplets and blessing characters. Prepare for the end of the year, select those who are excellent in writing and study, and Mengtong who have worked hard, and give them to them before the closing of the year. In addition, every night Qin Pingan will cut out wood and bamboo plaques, with a total of 300 or 400 pieces, and write a poem or another name for this word. The latter, such as tea, is no night. Bamboo and wooden plaques, the teacher wrote each stroke with ease. Sword of Coming Chapter 1030. Outside the sky, the stars are splendid, and a xianxia is boundless. A small old man wearing a purple robe, sitting on top of a huge gourd that seemed to float in the galaxy, and beside him was an old scholar who twitched his beard and smiled, posing as if he was looking forward to it. He said in a deficient tone, "Brother you are now a great cultivator of the 14th realm. It is said that when you reach this realm, your external objects are all burdens. If friends and relatives come here to congratulate you later, those congrats, why don't you help me collect it, brother?" Yu Xian had already joined the Dao here, and obtained a scroll of the dazzling river map of the flowing treasures. The map shows the galaxy and the river map is the star map. Since ancient times, only the moral sages have seen it and they are lucky enough to see it. Therefore, Yu Xian's acquisition of this thing is definitely an unexpected joy. After all, it is the kind of legendary god's destiny, a gift from the Dao. Even Yu Xian, who has never been poor in his whole life and does not blink his eyelids even when he sees an immortal soldier, still has a smile that cannot be concealed. Originally, Yu Xian still laughed at himself, but after all, he never really achieved the realm of not being happy with things. Fortunately, the old scholar left a sentence earlier, "Brother Yu is indeed a person who has achieved Taoism, and I have long been overwhelmed with pride, and I can't smile from ear to ear." The old man who held this scroll raised his arm and said with a hearty smile, "If it wasn't for Wenxing, how could you get this? If there are real Taoists who come here, all the gifts will belong to Wenxing." As for the old scholar himself being a legendary 14 realms, and the self-contradictory statement, Yu Xian didn't bother to care about it. Not to mention Wenxing's help this time, it would be equivalent to personally helping Yu Xian to get together earlier here, but only to say that the old real person is holding a picture of the river, a congenital treasure. How can it be measured by the money of the gods? The old Xiaotsai took out 2 pots of wine from his sleeves which he did not know where they came from, threw a pot to Yu Xian, drank a pot himself and said with a face, "My brother is really poor now and can't open the pot." I laughed, I made my brother laugh. Yu Xian smiled and said, "A gentleman seeks Tao, not food." The old Xiaotsai nodded vigorously, "It is very, very good, a gentleman is not worried about poverty." After taking a sip of wine, the old Xiaotsai stretched his neck, looked over to the world and quickly reminded, "Brother Yu, it seems that someone is coming, put away the river map quickly so as not to be misunderstood that you are showing off your family." Yu Xin heard the words helplessly and said, "Wen Xing, let's not hide the truth, the poor road can't do it for the time being, he can only carry it in his hand." Yu Xin, who had just successfully joined the Tao, was temporarily unable to hold this river map, and he couldn't even cast a blind eye on it. You can't even make it into your sleeve, let alone refining it into a life object. In fact, Yu Xin is destined to be unable to refine this river map, and can only keep it for you. People are like a library, like a collection of books. But even so, in the long years of cultivating in the future, Yu Xin can repeatedly read and observe this picture anytime and anywhere, and the benefits of the Tao are extraordinary. Together with Fu Lu, the old master can be said to be the ultimate and difficult attainment, and he can make further progress. It is precisely the difference of this one step that is the real difference between heaven and man. For example, now, Yu Xin just did a little extrapolation and calculation, and found that more than 10 kinds of big symbols that used to belong to the attic in the sky can all be drawn with confidence. The old Xiaozai said, "Let me try it out." Without hesitation, Yu Xin threw the star map in his hand towards Wen Xing. The old scholar raised his sleeves and put a star map in his sleeves. Yu Xin was stunned. The old scholar shrank his neck, held his sleeve with one hand, and immediately raised his butt, as if he was about to run away when he took the baby. Yu Xin was calm. The old scholar sat down again angrily and said with a face full of guilt, forgive me, every time I drink too much, it's just like this, habit, it's purely habit." The first human visitor can be described as rich and beautiful, with a willow branch attached to his waist. It was Lu Qi who stayed at the sun-falling ferry in the wild world. The old scholar laughed. It is not surprising that Lu Qi left his friend Chao group and came here alone on this trip. Need to know that this Lu Qi, formerly known as Lu Sanbian. Obviously he came from an official family, so why did he take such a name? There is an undocumented gossip on the mountain in the later generations, saying that it was Zhou's 8 characters in the name. And this picture of the river where Yu Xin is temporarily the master has appeared a few times in the long history of 10,000 years. There was once a master Taoist priest who was said to be the anonymous master of Huolong Jinren. His Taoist name was Bai Yun, but he did not know his real name. I have seen the scene of the star map coming out of the river with my own eyes, and then leaked the secret to the monks in the world, leaving behind the mysterious theory of 3 changes of the dragon map, and 2 obscure schemas. Lu Qi arrived in the shape of a rainbow, and when he saw Wen Xing and Yu Xin he stopped, bowed and saluted. "I have seen Wen Xing, congratulations to you Jinren." Yu Xin got up and made a bow in return. The old scholar jumped up and saluted. Previously at the Confucian temple, the old Xiaozai, Su Zi, and the talented Lu Qi in front of him each asked for a copybook. What is the value? They are all readers, talking about money is vulgar. Lu Qi once created Lu Jingjing, which is the retaining people's realm, with mixed reputations. I don't know how many pretentious geniuses of Taoism have been delayed. Of course, it is a kind of self-mistake. As recognized as one of the most underrated cultivators in the world, Lu Qi really made people look up to him after this battle. On the sea where Yangji occupies an absolutely favorable location, Lu Qi was able to crush Yangzi's water law with his magical powers, which made many Haoran cultivators fascinated. Chen Qinglu, the man who killed the dragon, had been to the Gongda forest in the previous discussion in the Confucian temple, and took the initiative to visit the old scholar who had restored the Confucian temple. The preacher and mentor of Zheng Juzhong in Beidasheng couldn't stand the old Zayakai's persuasion. After a few drinks he said a few sincere words. According to Chen Qinglu, Yang Ji, who was trying to escape back to the wilderness, would not have to bother the Confucian temple to her to the divine continent of Middle-earth if he met him at sea instead of Lu Qi. The implication is that as long as he uses his sword, Yang Ji, one of the great demons of the old throne, will not be able to live. Naturally, the old Xiaozai would not think that the other party was bragging and not drafting because what Chen Qinglu said was true and absolutely true. Besides, this guy can be Zheng Zhezhong's master, so what if he brags about it? Who is not convinced and has the ability to go to Baidi City to find Zheng Juzhong, saying that your master is bragging, I can't be angry. Chen Qinglu seemed to ask casually at the time, did Lu Qi really use more than 300 spells? The old scholar nodded. The outside world said there were 356 types. It was not easy to determine the exact number here at the Confucian temple. Anyway, it was less than 400. Chen Qinglu said with a smile, still a bit capable. Of course, the old scholar knew that Lu Qi would definitely enter the 14 realms. As for Su Zi, because there is Bai Yi, the great celestial master Zhao Tianlai, and because of the pure Yang Lu Yen, whether or not he can enter the 14 realms, there are 2 things to say. In any case, that little girl named Chai Wu was able to climb to the sky in one step at Qingping Sword Sect, and directly enter the 5 realms from the retention realm. Lu Qigong was extremely powerful. So the old Xiaozai laughed in his heart. It is better to be early than to be coincidental, and it is better to hit the sun when you choose a day. I also wish Mr. Lu a smooth journey here. Lu Qi was stunned for a while, then bowed again and thanked him. This trip is true. So it didn't stay long. The old Xiaozai sat back on the gourd and continued to drink. He never received any congratulations from Lu Qi's side, so he had a little regret. Then there was an old boatman holding a bamboo wormwood and leisurely rafting in the galaxy. It was the eldest disciple who was regarded by Chao Rong and the others as a senior but was not recognized by Lu Qin, Gu Qingsong, whose name was xianxia. The Milky Way is splendid and the boats and roads in the world are poor. Since ancient times, the only way to go to the Tianhe has been by xianxia. The old Xiaozai hurriedly got up to greet him, strode out, went straight to the boat-punching boat, stepped on the bow of the boat and said diligently, "Oh, isn't this Senior Xianxia? I haven't seen you for a long time. What's the matter? You don't look very energetic. What's the matter, and what great master has you learned about Taoism? Do you want my brother to help me and say a few words of justice?" Gu Qingsong was a little confused for a while. In fact, he and the 4th-ranked Wensheng in the Confucian Temple had no interaction before today, and it seemed that they had never chatted for a while. As soon as the old scholar became famous too quickly, he felt that he was born and became famous only a few years ago. In the blink of an eye, he went to the Confucian Temple to eat cold pork head meat. For Gu Qingsong, who has been traveling at sea all the year round, in the blink of an eye, the old scholar soon went to Gongdalan to eat in prison. In the past, when Gu Qingsong heard about this, he only thought it was a few dishes with wine and food, but how could he listen to the tone of the old scholar, like that kind of reunion after a long absence? Could it be that he lost his memory? Missing something? It's just that Gu Qingsong sneaked into Gongdalan last time. Isn't it just to see Qin Pingan, a veteran of Huatsong who has a very unique view on love between men and women? Moreover, at that meeting he made a deal with the boy surnamed Qin. He taught Qin Pingan a kind of escapism and Qin Pingan taught him the tricks which are really good and useful. The old Xiaozai grabbed Gu Qingsong's hand and shook it vigorously. "I have heard the name for a long time. I have been fascinated for a long time, fellow Taoist Xianxia, but he is a first-rate person with a temperament. I admire him." Gu Qingsong figured it out. It is estimated that the boy Qin Pingan was on Wensheng's side and said a few sincere and fair words. Therefore the old boatman, who usually doesn't say good things easily, nodded and said, "Qin Pingan and I are barely like people. Old scholar, you don't need to be so hypocritical. Stop, say a few more words. You are wasting your saliva. If you don't say it, I'm going to get goosebumps too." After saying this, Gu Qingsong turned his head to look at Yu Xian, and began to sacrifice a well-known natal supernatural power. "Old Yuto, dare to love is a luck again? To be honest, if you divide my luck in half, maybe generally, I don't need it. I have already gone to the Qingming world by Yujing to see the master." Yu Xian did not speak with a stern face. The old man had suffered losses from Gu Qingsong before. Gu Qingsong asked, "Why do you still put on a stinky face, such a big air? Do you think you are in the 15th realm?" The old scholar is eye-opening. The shadow of the famous tree of people is indeed a well-deserved reputation. I have seen someone who can speak, but I have never seen a few who can speak like that. It seems that Lu Qin has not accepted Xianxia Daoist friend as a disciple. Yu Xian laughed. Gu Qingsong said angrily, "A young 14th realm who has lived for thousands of years, see what you can do. If I remember correctly, or if the Confucian Temple didn't deceive people back then, the old show only spent dozens of dollars. Years of kung fu. It has become the 14th realm. You look at the old scholar. You are meeting me for the first time tonight. Have you set up with me?" Yu Xian rubbed his brows and said helplessly, "I'm afraid of you." Lao Zhouzi and Lao Shiokai said goodbye, turned the bow of the boat and snorted hard. "I came to congratulate you with good intentions, but it turns out that the eyes are on the skull. It's bad, it's not a thing." Yu Xian smiled bitterly and did not dare to scold back. The old scholar looked at his nose and heart, and he didn't dare to take a breath. Gu Qingsong suddenly turned his head and said, "Old Xiaozai, you are a good person. Compared with someone, the positions of the two of you have to be reversed. This can be regarded as a real world if there is no such friend as someone. It's even better. Come back to me, the two of us have a good drink and don't get drunk. Maybe it's my wedding wine." The old Xiaozai said quickly, "It's easy to talk, it must be done." After Gu Qingsong punted the boat back to the world, he went straight to the Osmanthus Island ferry. The old Xiaozai returned to Yu Xian and asked with a smile, "What's the matter? Have you provoked fellow Taoist Xianxia before?" Yu Xian said with a sullen face, The problem is that Pindao until now doesn't know why this guy blocked the door and cursed people. The old Xiaotsai asked curiously, "What did I scold you for?" Yu Xian said, "Generally speaking, it is to scold the poor road for not being upright and the lower beam crooked." The old Xiaotsai smiled and said, "Who let brother you have so many disciples and grandchildren, and being scolded by fellow Taoist xianxia, I really feel guilty for a while." Xuanhuan sighed. The third person to congratulate was the sage of Xiaoling, and the world-renowned old master Su. Although the old man was not among the sages in the Confucian temple, nor in the context of Confucian Taoism, the old master Su was a scholar with great merit. Similar to the old man who sits in the imitation Baiyujing in Aquarius today, they are all real hermits. After Master Su and Yu Xian had finished their polite greetings, the old scholar finally had the opportunity to speak, gave a thumbs up and said solemnly, "Master Su, you don't know something, my closed disciple. Every time I mention you, my admiration is beyond words. It is this." Old Master Su smiled indifferently and said, "When Sheng can call me by my name and I can't be praised by Xianhuan." The old Xiaotsai sighed and complained in his eyes, "What is Xianhuan if you see it outside? If we are brothers of the same generation, you can treat Qin Pingan as your own junior. If you meet him later you can just call your nephew." As soon as these words came out, Master Su did not know how to answer. When Sheng's temper and guarding against his shortcomings are well known in the world. If you are polite to him he will not be polite to you. Then there is the current mountain chief of Tonggishao Dufu Academy, Qing Longzhou, who was born in Wanyan Laojiao. Used to be a frequent visitor. Naturally they talked about the excavation of Dadu in Tonggishao. The old Xiaotsai was full of joy. "If you want to talk about rhetoric and feats as a closed-door disciple, I don't talk much, but do more." Qing Longzhou smiled and said, "It is admirable that Xianhuan fills the gap in Tonggishao." The old Xiaotsai was silent for a moment, then smiled, "Wherever you are, do your part and do not let the teacher. Youth is better than blue." After that, there was Wei Shi, a genius monk who was once considered to be his possessions in the 14th realm. After the master of the 72 peaks left, great monks came here one after another to congratulate him. There are also several Taoist ascension realms in the Qingming world. The last person to congratulate was the monk Xinqing, nicknamed Chicken Soup Monk. "Great monk, in our hearts, there is a right and a wrong first, and there must be a right or a wrong. Right? Right." Luopao Mountain, a cliffside stone table outside the bamboo building. The bright moon is in the sky, like a big jade plate of a rich family. A girl in a pink skirt, and a little girl in black wrapped in cotton slung across the body, admired the moon together, and they chatted in whispers that seemed to be endless. Tonight's broken mouth snacks are not cakes and melon seeds, but branches of azalea petals, all of which are the spoils of the right guardian of the mountain alone tonight. The stone bench beside the table is not short, the warm tree can touch the bottom with both feet, and the little girl who is a little short will have her boots hanging in the air when sitting. Millet suddenly lay on the table and asked Nwanshu's sister to stretch out her hand. Nwanshu didn't know what to do, so she still stretched out her palm. Millet raised her palm, let out a sigh of relief, shook her fist a few times and finally patted it on Nwanshu. In Sister Shu's hand she said solemnly, "Pei Qian said that those top experts who fly over the eaves and walls can easily pass on 1 or 100 years of internal strength to others. On my side I'm not good at learning martial arts, but this hand of mine is immortal. Sister Nwanshu, give it to you, put it away." Nwanshu was still confused, still clenched his fists and smiled softly, "I got it." The little girl nodded, put her arms around her chest, turned her body sideways, faced the cliff, swayed her legs and knocked on the stone bench with her heels again and again, angrily said, "Actually it was originally intended to give Pei Qian. She has been so long. If you don't go home it's my fault." Having said this, Xiaomi Meili turned his head and explained, "Because Pei Qian has only been to school for a few days and he likes to skip class early in the morning. Unlike Sister Nwanshu, you read every day. I don't need this, I will rub it from the copybook. Here comes the fairy spirit." It turned out that the good man Mountain Master was on the table last time, and in front of the millet grains, the 2 fonts of Su Zi and Lu Qi were spread out. Naturally they are undoubtedly authentic. After all, it was his husband who personally begged them to ask for it. If it could be fake, there would be no real thing in the world. At that time Millet reached out and touched the 2 copybooks, thinking that he must have some fairy spirit. When it was late at night, one woke up in the morning to clean the courtyard, and the other wanted to patrol the mountains, so they returned to their residence together. Before they left the stone table, they found that the first floor of the bamboo building was still lit, and the good man was still reading a book. Nuanshu raised his finger to his mouth and Xiaomi nodded vigorously, knowing. Nuanshu first sent the millet to the gate of the courtyard, and said goodbye to Sister Nuanshu. Millet did not move in a hurry. When Sister Nuanshu was far away, she approached the door and squatted with her knees as if she was stuck. With a hoarse step, his hands sank into his dantian, he slowly handed out a palm and pressed his palm against the gate. When the door opened, the little girl in black retracted her palm, straightened her waist again and stood still, strode across the threshold, very satisfied, and nodded. According to what Pei Chen said from the novels of the romance of the martial arts, why did this palm of hers come about? I'll have to have 30 years of strength. Right? Hufa does not lock the door when he goes home, and never locks the door when he goes out. The door locks are all pretentious. In the past it was convenient for Pei Chen to visit the door, but later it became a habit. When Xiaomi arrived at her residence, the room she lived in was also a study. She shook her head and walked to the desk, lit the oil lamp and sat down on the chair. Oh, her feet stomped on the ground. The tables and stools in the house are all made by the old cook, so they look small. There are not many books on the table, they are neatly stacked together. Most of them were seen by Pei Chen when he was a child, and then they were given to Xiaomi. Millet tilted her head, took off her beloved cotton satchel that was inseparable every day, placed it on the table, patted the satchel lightly and said with a grin, luxurious. Dali Old Beiwa territory, Longquan Jianzong and Yi Peak. Lu Xianyang is in retreat. Said to be a retreat, in fact, closed the door to sleep, but it was not the kind of dozing in the past. Credit Yu, who goes by the pseudonym Yu Qianyue, knew very well that Lu Xianyang's retreat this time was unusual and the seriousness of the stakes, so she simply stayed outside Lu Xianyang's house, never leaving her. Anyway, with her Dao roots and realm cultivation base, she didn't feel tired even if she didn't sleep for a year and a half. The young man named Li Xuanhuan finally chose Su Xiaoqiao as his teacher and practiced at Zuhaifeng. Lu Xianyang said earlier that after exiting the customs, he had to go to Hangzhou. In addition to the place where the ancient Shu sword immortals coexisted and left the land of immortal shedding, Hangzhou Yuzhang County, where giant trees were produced, also left some biography. The ancient tradition of entertaining gods and offering sacrifices. Shengyue heard footsteps, she turned her head. A timid man hiked up the mountain, came to this Yui Peak, saw the round-faced girl who wore cotton-padded clothes all year round, nodded. On Yu Qianyu's side, was called by Lu Xianyang. The man who was the blacksmith Ruan still had a smile on his face. Ruan Qiong put his hands together and walked very lightly. When he got here he just asked in his heart, "He is retreating?" Shengyue nodded and explained, "This time is different from before, it may be more dangerous." Ruan Qiong also nodded. If it wasn't for this he would not have made such a trip to Yui Peak, but the man still said in a tone that seemed to be understated, "Xianyang is a person who can't be idle, and there will be a spare girl in the future. Be patient." Shengyue remembered the conversation Lu Xianyang had before the retreat. She blushed slightly and she was a little embarrassed, but she was not the kind of cowardly woman and said, "Mr. Ruan, if I really become a Taoist partner with Lu Xianyang, I will want it cause unnecessary trouble for Longquan Sword Sect?" Ruan Qiong shook his head and said, "No." Shengyue hummed softly. Ruan Qiong glanced at the house, only came for a while, then turned and left as if remembering something but did not turn his head, still put his hands behind his back, but slowed down a little and said, "If I just said if in the future, what's wrong with this kid Xianyang? He has been reading for a few days and he has a lot of crooked ideas. You can't quarrel with him, or if he is stubborn and wants to save face, he refuses to admit his mistakes and apologize to you, just tell me, I'm not the suzerain and I'm still his master anyway, so it's always okay to scold him a few words." Shengyue smiled brightly, "I remember. In the impression of the credit month, Master Ruan didn't seem to have said so many words to anyone." Ruan Qiong just quickened his pace, but before he took a few steps, he hesitated for a moment. The man stopped and said, "According to the custom in the town, there are usually 2 weddings, one in the man's hometown and one in the man's hometown. In the woman's house, so one banquet will be held in Huaihuang County, and the other, if Miss Yu doesn't dislike it, she will have a drink at our Longquan Jianzong side, and pick a random hill outside the Yui Peak and drink it. After the wedding ceremony, the hilltop is Miss Yes dojo, and it is a little bit of my elder's will. As for Lu Xianyang's best man, according to the rules he will have 2 drinks with the groom's official, so he can help Xianyang to stop the wine." When Shengyue heard this, she looked at the back who seemed to use a lot of energy to say these homely words. She was a little sad for no reason. Shujian Lake, Sulin Island, Tian Hujuan as the island owner, after the young cultivator who didn't know if he could be regarded as a junior brother left, she was still a little dazed and scared. On the other side of Gonglu Island, Zhou Caijin, a young female cultivator who was walking in the moonlight, learned that the seemingly genial-looking young man in a Confucian shirt was the notorious Guken who was full of evil, especially when he used a very casual tone. Said the shocking words, the new accounts and the old accounts were calculated together, and the old sect master Lu was killed? Zhou Caijin was even more frightened and turned pale. She intuitively told her that the other party was not joking, but the other party was reporting his identity, and the last sentence he said was exactly that, I was joking, don't take it seriously. Guken sacrificed the talisman boat and left Gonglu Island by punting. As Gonglu Island, where the True Realm Patriarch Hall is located, immortal Lu Laoqing and Beidasheng female cultivator Han Xiaosa sat opposite each other. It's just that the young woman at the door who claimed to need to work for Guken for 100 years has disappeared, completely ignoring the prohibition of the formation arranged by Lu Laoqing himself. She appeared on Guken's talisman boat, looking at the man sitting cross-legged. The young man in the Confucian shirt at the bow said with a smile, the sects in the vast world are more savvy than those in my hometown. I can't remember the messy institutions. Guken asked, my sister-in-law wants you fight with sect master Lu if you disagree? Didn't you stay there to persuade you? What are you doing here? She smiled sweetly, a fight? How to fight, where to fight? Guken said indifferently, effective, not funny jokes. If you can't tell them, don't tell them. She pouted. This guy in the end is a little bit more obsessed with Han Xiao. This wild female cultivator who calls herself Guken's maid, is called Chun Xiao. Now that the pseudonym is efficacious, Guken helped to take it not long ago and she is very satisfied. In the wild world her name is Ziwu Meng. Of course it is also a pseudonym. The last person to help with the name was Wenhai Zhoumi. She moved from the stern to the bow and sat beside Guken with her head tilted to his shoulder. After a while she felt bored, who had quietly performed a secret technique, so she sat upright again and glanced at Guken's crotch. She was full of slander, she was hard-hearted, she didn't have the slightest thoughts. She was in the secret territory of Lu Laocheng's dojo on Gonglu Island. She was a common maid's costume in the wealthy portals of the wealthy and noble at the foot of the mountain. At this moment she has become a woman's crown costume, which is full of beauty. Luo Xiao is light and thin, fluttering like a blue cloud. The waist is slender and the eyes are full of amorous feelings. She asked, Guken, how did you do it? Guken said, the phoenix is upside down in the embroidery, the love of the quilt and pillow, the joy of the fish in the water, and the utmost care, and so on. When you are in such a charming situation, all you need to do is to observe the white bones. Cut 3 corpses, chase 5 ghosts, subdue 6 desires and 7 emotions. She leaned back, it's boring to follow you. It's not as good as that eloquent real monarch anyway. When the other party sees her, he still needs to stabilize his mind a little, and then nag a few words of hypocrisy, like a 7-foot body, wearing the sky and walking on the ground, not yielding to the death. As one of the heavenly cultivators carefully selected by Zhoumi, in fact her true face on the mountain is a garb with a mask and a piano bag, and almost no one has seen her true face. The various faces at the moment are naturally transformed by her after taking off the mask, and it is different from ordinary blindfolding methods. As long as she is willing, the appearance, figure, dress and demeanor that the world sees in the eyes of the world is the direction of their hearts. Thinking people. The shape is similar and the spirit is similar, which can be almost real. Therefore, in the wild world, Jiang Shangzhen first saw this female cultivator who didn't know whether it was an aunt or a sister. The first impression was that she was well-born and had a superb figure, which was really round and smooth. It's just that she was in Xiaoxiandi at the time, and the manifested Taoist atmosphere was extremely infiltrating, and even Jiang Shangzhen, a daring thing, seemed to be poured a basin of cold water. It turned out that behind Ziwumeng, the bodies of countless hanged ghosts were hanging in the air. One of her natal objects is a fan, painting thousands of ladies. All of them are lifelike, their faces are eloquent, they murmur in the picture scroll, but unfortunately they are all beautiful faces and bones. As a sword cultivator's meridian dream, Guqin is the flying sword Jingguan, and one of the magical powers of this flying sword is to weave a dream, and let the long river of time within a certain range, or an indefinite river come to a standstill. Previously in Baidi City, Han Koz felt unhappy when she saw her. The reason is very simple, but this little girl looks too good-looking. But don't let Guqin indulge in the love of men and women. To say that this girl and Guqin are halfway partners, Han Xiao doesn't care much. Like Guqin, if there is no group of Yingyan Jianyan around. It's just that he was wronged. She couldn't stand Guqin's refusal to talk, so she found a topic. This True Realm sect is just the next sect of Tongyi's Hao Yuguazang. Do you know how many institutions there are? There are more than 20 Zhu Shirtang Zhang under the monk Lu, there are 7 or 8, and there seem to be 10 small ones under the hands of the ancestor who manages the money. Yaman? I just don't understand. What's the difference? And the Treasure House Bureau of the Department of Support and the Department of Operation, don't they all manage such a little fairy money so they have to be split up? Guken turned a deaf ear, just closed his eyes, breathed slowly and silently studied a water method. The female cultivator lying on the bow raised her legs, shook one leg gently and asked casually, revisiting the old place, what do you think? Guken looked calm, smiled and said, it's hard to drink alcohol. Ziwumeng twitched the corners of his mouth. Finally, are you willing to be dumb? Guken continued, just talking about the Bureau of Economic Affairs and the Department of Rights, similar to the Yamen on the mountain, it's actually very simple. For example, one can decide how many chairs to put in the ancestral hall, and the other can decide who is eligible to sit on it. Of course. The Ritual System Department will also be in charge of the Golden and Jade genealogy of a Shinfu sect, so the monks who work here are American officials, and they are a bit more expensive than the monks in the Economic System Bureau. Ziwu Meng suddenly realized, so, I understand, it's interesting. Guken smiled indifferently and said, a mountain, whether it is Zongzi or a small sect like the Wudao school, if there are more people and there are fewer people, there are few people. I am afraid that the organization will be bloated, and there will be many redundant staff and I will be more afraid of people. There are too many, one by one they are full and they have to find something to do. It seems that this is worthy of the title and status, which is very troublesome. Ziwu Meng is not very interested in these things. In the wild world she has always been alone. The throne demon Yangji and Fei Fei have recruited her one after another, but because she has that amulet on her body, even if Ziwu Meng is on her body. After stealing the Wooding River and refining it, Yangji and Fei Fei both pinched their noses and recognized it. They were worried that this move was secretly instigated by Wenhai Zhoumi. She turned around, held her cheek with one hand and poked Guken's arm with her finger. Tell me, why do you want to fight Chao Ci knowing that you will lose? What are you planning? Besides, what does a Qi trainer compete with a pure martial artist? In fact, Ziwu Meng knows very little about this master, except that he is the junior disciple of the fellow traveler Fu Yu and the direct disciple of Zheng Juzhong in Beidasheng. As for Guken's hometown, at most it is based on Han Xiaosa and Lu. The content of Lao Cheng's conversation shows that Guken practiced here for a few years when he was young. During this period he seemed to be worshipping the chief of the True Realm sect with the Taoist name True Monarch Zhejiang. Other than that, she doesn't know anything about it. Even when Guken went to see a shabby Jindan female cultivator before, she was not willing to take her with her. She just left her beside Han Ko's to persuade her to fight? How to persuade, although she of course, it is a genuine Jade Pure Realm Sword cultivator, but Han Ko's and Lu Laoqing, the two immortal realms, are not ordinary things that once died in her hands in their hometown. But she didn't think that she was of the door in vain. It wasn't a waste of time. Not to mention that in Han Xiao's eyes she was Guken without any suspense. In Lu Laoqing's eyes, there was also a woman who was copied by Ziwa's dream. But the woman's description was vague and fleeting. Guken said, there's no reason, it's just not pleasing to the eyes of Chao Ci. Ziwuming pretended to be surprised. I'm even more surprised. No matter how you look at Chao Ci, he is not an annoying guy just like me. I would feel that being a Taoist partner with him is a high climb. To be honest, Chao Ci, as long as I am willing, I will definitely propose a pillow seat. So, you won't be angry, will you? Guken finally opened her eyes and seemed to think that her statement was no nonsense. Ziwu Meng suddenly looked ashamed and angry. Guken, are you still a man? Guken just stared straight ahead, expressionless, with his hands folded on his stomach, the wind blowing on his face, a young man in a Confucian shirt with a black jade hairpin on his head, his hair on the temples fluttered slightly, which made Guken more and more floating, said, the ugly words are ahead at least for 100 years, don't like me. After 100 years, pay off the debt and you and I can go our separate ways. Ziwu Meng instantly restrained her attitude, sighed, her eyes became resentful, and her face changed accordingly, like a girl who is extremely beautiful, extremely weak, but full of love. After that, it was probably because of her mood changes. In just a few blinks of an eye, she had 7 or 8 different looks and expressions, but in the end she returned to her previous female crown appearance, sighed faintly, and said in a gentle voice, Guken, it seems that you are only in your early 30s, I really don't know how you cultivated the Tao heart. Guken said, you don't get drunk if you drink bitter wine. She was silent for a long time and asked, who are you going to see now? Guken stood up and said, Go to Oriole Island and meet a senior with the Taoist named Xiang who practiced fire art. My previous master was a deadly enemy for many years. Now he is a genealogy cultivator of the True Realm sect, living in Gonglu Island. The kind that has seats in the ancestral hall. She asked, Senior? What realm? Gukin said, Yuaning. She laughed dumbly. When I came to an island, the surrounding scene, the smoke and waves were vague and the weather was sparse. Suspected to be the Narcissus grooming place, the center of a Luo Qingdai mirror. Gukin put away the talisman boat, and at the same time removed the blindfold, showed her figure, and then took Ziwuming to shrink the ground in one step, and went straight to a high-rise building. Zhong Su, the island owner of Oriole Island, noticed the two strange breaths, and had already walked out of the top floor, leaning on the railing, squinting silently, just overlooking the young man in the square. His little junior brother likes this little very much, but Zhong Su has never looked down on this person. Even today it is still the case. Otherwise, if any monk from Beidasheng came to Oriole Island, Zhong Su would be willing to take the initiative to welcome the guests. The handsome and elegant scholar in green shirt, holding the junior salute, bowed towards the roof of the building. Gukin pays respects to Mr. Zhong. Zhong Su sneered and said, You are already in the Jade Purity realm, and you are even more of an apprentice of Mr. Zheng in Beidasheng. I am just a nascent soul with a rotten skin. On the way of cultivation, the one who succeeds is the first, and I can't afford it. Gukin always raised her head and said with a smile, On the road of cultivating one's heart, Gukin is always a junior. Zhong Su sneered and said, Don't be so pretentious. It's easy to change your temperament. You Gukin can deceive people in the world, but you can't deceive an old man like Shijianhu like me. Gukin smiled and said, Mr. Zhong is still being polite. He probably wanted to say that a dog can't stop eating shit? Zhong Su nodded and said, It's still a bit self-aware. It seems that you are able to enter the 5 realms, not all thanks to that Mr. Zheng. Gukin said, The offense to visit tonight is to discuss something with Mr. Zhong. Zhong Su frowned and said, Stop talking nonsense and get out of here. The female cultivator who looked like a maid beside Gukin, raised her palm and yawned. Are all the nascent soul cultivators in the world so daring and majestic? Gukin lowered his head, stretched out his hand and rubbed his neck, raised his head again and said with a smile, I beg Mr. Zhong to hear about that incident and then order the expulsion. I never thought that Zhong Su would turn around and walk into the house. Gukin smiled and turned to leave Oriole Island. Ziwuming was shocked. Just left. Gukin asked back, Otherwise? Ziwuming said, Get rid of him. Gukin rarely joked, It's not in your hometown. This habit of fighting and killing at every turn, I didn't open a coffin shop, you can change it later. Ziwuming suddenly smiled, took Gukin's arm and asked softly, Is it soft? How big is it? Gukin dealt with it indifferently without breaking free of her arm and said, To be honest, in my hometown, your kind of dirty talk is the level of a schoolboy. Ziwuming shook off his arm and said angrily, The elm knot that doesn't understand the style, the master who won't move his on the bed. Gukin smiled and said, Ziwuming turned her head in surprise and looked at Gukin, whose eyes and complexion were somewhat unfamiliar, as if she was in a better mood. Do you remember your hometown? The ferry was sailing across the lake, and the moonlight shone on the lake. Ziwuming asked, Do you want to draw a strong man? Gukin nodded, If Zhong Su can serve as the patriarch of my sect, it will be a good choice for both parties. Now that he talked about that sect, Ziwuming asked, Then do you think Lu Yuzhou will agree to your invitation? Gukin said, Only a fool would agree. Ziwuming smiled and said, Then have you thought of the name of the sect? Since Gukin said so, Lu Yuzhou is most likely willing to serve as the deputy suzerain. Gukin nodded and said, Think about it. Ziwuming asked, Let's hear it. You misunderstood me. Lu Yuzhou is not a fool, so he won't agree. Unless I go to see him once, it is possible to dispel his doubts. Gukin said, As for the name of the sect, the answer is far in the sky and right in front of you. Ziwuming understood it and called it Shujin Lake. Where are you going next? She asked. Gukin smiled and said, I'm going to a city on the shore and I'll meet a friend who can't be considered a friend. He was a child at that time and I often chatted with him. She was really shocked this time and she blurted out, Gukin, you have friends too? Gukin's face darkened and she said softly, Of course I have it, but it means I don't have it anymore. He fell back, making a pillow with his hands, and was dazed. Thousands of clouds and water, a bright moon a day, a bright moon a day. The young man sniffed. In the Yenzhou mansion of Dali, the source of a stream, under the eaves of the village school, Qin Pingan, who was lying on a rattan chair, sat up with a fan in his hand. The night was dark, and in Zhao Shuxia's field of vision, two people seemed to appear out of thin air, and they stepped out. The Taoist said with a smile, "When the rivers and lakes meet again there is alcohol, and when you meet an old friend, you don't drink flowers when you meet the moon. When will you wait?" Looking at the young warrior, the Taoist patted the boy next to him on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Zhao Shuxia, let me introduce him, his name is Ningji and he is your little junior brother." The central part of Aquarius, Xuanhuan Mountain and Fanwan House. The young Taoist began to betray the sword-carrying boy, "Even if you Qin Pingan didn't do it yourself, and hit the guy with the nickname Wenlang but his eyes were not right, anyway let your closed disciple let's girl pay beat that guy so I can teach him know what is pressing the situation and ask boxing, why you must read the almanac when you go out, and what is the sinister rivers and lakes." It seems that Zhang Jiaolu has become ruthless, and even his own disciples and grandchildren are really pitiful. When Shin had already noticed that Taoist priest, and from time to time he looked at himself, still the kind of sneaky out of the corner of his eyes, or a slightly provocative squinting. When Shin didn't intend to bother with this cotton-robed Taoist priest, but just thought it was interesting so he asked in his heart, "This Taoist priest know me?" Unexpectedly, the Taoist priest looked at the thick eyebrows and big eyes. Although he was a little shabby he still looked like Zhou Zheng but his temper was not ordinary. He replied directly, "I know your ancestors." How did Wen Xin know that the shabby Taoist priest in his eyes was a young monk in the eyes of the palace master, just as a land and a martial arts master? After being scolded like this, Wen Xin still smiled as usual. After all, he is the same as the lower 5 realms. He glanced at the young woman with the bun with the ball next to the boy behind the sword, retracted his gaze and continued to ask, "Why do you like this girl?" The Taoist scolded loudly, "You with a crooked melon and a jujube, keep your eyes peeled, look at you." Wen Jing couldn't help laughing and laughing. Is he a fool without roots? The Taoist priest took a sip of wine, moistened his throat and said doubtfully, "You want reply, what are you doing?" One carefully can be sure is a real fool. I thought to myself that I should talk to such a fool again. I am a fool. The Taoist priest continued to scold, "If the poor Taoist is your master's grandfather, Taoist I will be your grandfather's master." One raised his brows carefully and said with a smile, "Swear again, continue." The Taoist priest shook his shoulders, his hippie smile began to be a demon and he said cheaply, "Hey no, how old are you? Let the poor Tao scold you, just scold you, Malur, hurry up and let your grandfather come. Tao lord this when a master, he is willing to open his mouth and teach him a few words. If he drinks a few glasses of fine wine, the Dao has a lot of it, even if he has exposed it in one stroke." While Wen Jing felt absurd, he hesitated for a while but still asked in his heart, "Palace master, can this little Taoist priest with sharp eyes and eyes see his real realm?" The master of Lingfei Palace, the ancestor of Xianxuan, had just received a decree from the master, and was talking to the old woman next to him that his master had personally promised to restore someone's genealogy status. "Xinyan, are you pretending to be the ancestral hall's rules?" Hearing Wen's careful questioning, Xiang Jun frowned slightly. It turned out that he used the term little bald donkey, so he said to him first and then answered the question, "There is no doubt about the lower 5 realms." When Shen was a little confused, wondering why the palace lord wanted to go up the line to the point of being in the ancestral hall, didn't he just give the young Taoist a snarky evaluation? He didn't bother to look into it. He smiled and looked at the Taoist priest. "Come out, let's make a gesture." The Taoist priest reached out and rolled up one of his sleeves, raised his arm, pressed his elbow against the wine table, shook his wrist and began to ramble, "Come on, you ignorant little bastard, break your wrists with the Taoist master. Hurt and anger, whoever loses is who is the ancestor." One carefully thought for a moment that he had guessed a pile of on the soles of his shoes. According to a certain dialect, the guy in front of him was clearly a 6. Patriarch Xiangjuan glanced at the young monk, and then looked at one carefully. "What are you doing?" Chen Pingan, who looked like a boy with a sword behind his back, didn't pay any attention to the conversation over there, although Zhang Jiaolu deliberately did it so that Chen Pingan and Pei Qian could hear it clearly. Pei Qian ignored it because she was talking to her master about something. "Master, there are several hilltops near Luopao Mountain. The Gray Mountain in the north is already our own vassal's hilltop. In addition there are Chindu Peak, Tiaoyu Mountain and Fiolu, which are all close neighbors." Qin Pingan asked with a smile, "Of course I know, why do you suddenly say this?" Pei Qian scratched his head as if a little embarrassed. Qin Pingan held back his smile and said, "Why, when I was a child I had a personal grudge with those monks on the hilltops. Men and women. After all, he is his own founding disciple and he only talks about revenge. As for Xianhuan, when he grows up, it is estimated that he will not be able to compete with the Qi trainers on the neighboring hills. Pei Qian said, "A few years ago I went out to travel and saved some money, so I made my own decision and bought the Fuyaolu privately. It had a title deed and I didn't say hello to the old cooks." Qin Pingan was a little strange and said with a smile, "It's a good thing, what's so embarrassing about it?" A few of them, Pei Qian, save money. In fact, almost everyone in Luopeishan knows, for example, Shi, Mili and Wanshu have their own money jars for a long time. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "How much money was spent? Is the price expensive? In the future, I plan to use that place as my own martial arts venue. Do I need master's help in building the mansion? No worse than an old cook. It's not expensive." The other party is very talkative and gave a very fair price. Pei Qian scratched his head subconsciously again and whispered, "Master, I didn't intend to move there from the beginning." Qin Pingan was puzzled at this moment and asked softly, "How do you say it?" Pei Qian raised his head, looked at his master and said with a grin, "Master, I just thought, I haven't given you a birthday present for many years and I kept saving money when I was a child, but I didn't save much money at that time, and it seemed that I couldn't buy anything valuable. After learning boxing, going out to travel, earning some money and returning home alone, I bought the Fuyaolu. I thought that maybe on the 5th day of May next year I could tell Master about it. The incident has been delayed until now and most of this year I will stay on Tongye continent, busy with Dadu affairs, so I just took this opportunity to tell Master. It's just that the girl at that time, thinking about next year, Master will probably return to Howren World, but after a lot of next year Master has not returned home." Qin Pingan smiled and nodded vigorously, unable to hide his full smile. "Okay, Master is very happy just like the gift he received last time." But Pei Qian lowered his head again. "I just thought, Master has not really had a place to be alone for so many years. When I think of this I feel sad." In Luopao Mountain, Master lives on the first floor of the bamboo building. The second floor is where Master learns boxing. No matter what others think, whether they think or not, Pei Qian knows that since Grandpa Chui left, Master is actually not feeling well. It seems that Master has been working hard since he was 14 years old when he first went out for a long journey. Sword of Coming Chapter 1031. The spring grass is faint, the bright moon is late, and the stream is gurgling to persuade you to drink. Qin Pingan asked Zhao Shuxia to bring a bamboo chair to entertain guests, and then went to prepare a late-night snack. Lu Qin hurriedly said, "Under the tree you can just go to the kitchen to get busy, and the poor road will get a chair by himself, and the snacks other than supper, the poor road will have it here." Otherwise, Headmaster Lu was worried that he would have no place and would have to squat and drink. Lu Qin was familiar with the road and went to Qin Pingan's house to bring a small table and 2 chairs out. After taking a seat with the boy, our Headmaster Lu did not forget to wipe the table with our sleeves. Qin Pingan asked with a smile, "Ningji, think about it, don't you regret it?" The young man's eyes were firm and he nodded, "Mr. Qin, I have made up my mind. If I want to be your student, Ningji will also remember the favor of Headmaster Lu in my heart, and I will repay it when I have the opportunity in the future." Qin Pingan glanced at Lu Qin, thinking with his butt, that this fellow must have led the boy through a long scroll of time. Lu Qin began to put gold on his face, waved his hand and said, "It's not hard work, it's not hard at all. There is a long river of time, but not everyone can wading in the water casually. Even the great monks dare not visit the time at will, even if they are in it, the general ascension realm is mostly a last resort. At this time we must use the long river of time to renew our minds, or try our luck to see if we can find a blessed land that has disappeared in the long river of history. If the swirling water vortex of the funnel, it is easy for Qi practitioners to fall into it and lose their whereabouts. In history many great monks said that they were retreating and failed. In fact, they were like mud cows entering the sea in the long river of time, making wedding clothes for others and later generations. The great monk fished the golden body fragments from the long river of time, and it came from this. What's more, there are many visions of the stagnant water becoming a lake or the river flowing into a stagnant water. Previously, Qin Pingan, and the sword holder in the shop of Qilong Alley, inviting Bai Jing to sit at the same table is one of the manifestations of the Great Road in this scene. On the mountain, only a veritable mountain cultivator who holds some heavy treasures can preach and protect his disciples in this way. This tempering the physique has many benefits, especially the 3 souls and 7 souls that can nourish the Qi cultivator, but the risk is too high. Big, if one is not careful, many cultivators who have achieved extremely high levels of Taoism may directly become demented fools, just because their memory and consciousness are like drowning, drifting with water, losing their minds and unable to evoke their souls afterwards. Qin Pingan walked by himself several times. The first time was to follow Mr. Qi and the second time was at the Taoist temple in Lotus Flower Blessed Land, where he was beside the old Guanju, enjoying a picture scroll of 100 or 200 years. Lu Qin glanced at the young man sitting on the side and praised, Ningji performed very well. He didn't need help from the poor Taoist at all. He quickly adapted to the walking of the time picture scroll. Qin Pingan nodded, it's amazing. I remember the first time I waded in the water, I was dizzy and almost vomited on the spot. Lu Qin smiled and said, this is the difference between a half-hearted aptitude for ground materials and an outstanding talent. The young man with straw sandals whose life is broken is indeed a half-hearted immortal. Lu Qin's evaluation is very objective. Qin Pingan didn't take it seriously, but he was happy when he heard it. Who would despise his students and disciples for being too clean-cut and having a good aptitude for learning the Tao? Ningji was stunned, his fists clenched and placed on his knees, seemingly at a loss. The teenager didn't know the praise from Zhang Jiaolu and Mr. Chen for the time being. It was definitely not a compliment, and he didn't know the danger of wading across the river. He mistakenly thought it was the kind words of the two seniors about other people's children. But it's good to accept apprentices, of course it's good. As for the price, you must know better than me. Lu Qin restrained the smile on his face and asked, Qin Pingan, have you thought about it too? To be honest, being able to find Ningji so quickly was indeed beyond Lu Qin's expectations. This is called it is difficult for gods to catch noon fish. Originally, Lu Qin had already planned to spend 3 or 5 years in Howren World and 7 or 8 years in the long run, so he could just take this opportunity to wipe his and solve some historical problems that had some causal relationship with him, such as the previous one at Baihua Lake. Lao Yuan, who sits in the Dragon King Temple, the Dao Seed on Shiro riding Dragon Lane, Zhu Lu, who should have been one of the Taoist protectors of the Big Brother, and of course Gu Qingsong, whose Dao name is xianxia. Also there is an understanding, whether it is to let Josie completely die and be included in the heart of Nanhua City's genealogy award, or to take the old Josie to Baiyujing together. Lu Qin is still considering it, and because of the last one 3,000 years ago. Because of the real dragon, Lu Qin owed a debt of love to Aunt Feng, who was scorching the forehead of wormwood, and a bunch of big and small things like this made Lu Qin feel very tired. Qin Pingan nodded, as long as Ningji thinks about it himself, there will be no problem on my side. Lu Qin said, I have to thank you for this. Intentionally planting flowers will not bloom, inadvertently planting willows and willows make shade. As long as Lu Qin finds Ningji, no matter what the reason is, no matter how difficult or easy the process is, if the Confucian Temple only looks at the results, it will be counted as a large amount of merit and deeds by the headmaster Lu, which is clearly recorded in the book. The more senior Lu Qin was, the more he knew about the inside story and the truth, and the more he understood the preciousness of adding a few strokes to the Confucian Temple's merit book, especially at the critical juncture where the patriarch of the 3 religions was about to disperse. To give a simple example, the wealthy families and wealthy portals at the foot of the mountain may not be able to keep money and property, and even books to their descendants. Phil. Qin Pingan said, it's nothing, not to mention that Taoist Lu accompanied Ningji on this journey of mountains and rivers, which is enough as a thank you gift. Lu Qin was silent for a moment, and it seemed that he couldn't think of a suitable thank you gift for a while, so he put a pot of wine on the table. It's just a drink tonight, don't drink too much so as not to get drunk and lose your temper and make some jokes on the junior's side. Qin Pingan looked at the pot of Gung Yunfeng's spring sleepiness wine, and said in amazement, Master Lu is already so familiar with the Lord of Mount Huang? Lu Qin said boldly, I know it very well, why not, it's like the first sight. Huang Zhongho of Gingyun Peak is now the new owner of Yunxia Mountain, which has caused a lot of speculation in Aquarius. It is said that Kai Jingjian of Green Juniper Peak is similar to Huang Zhongho Daoling, but she is already in the nascent soul realm, but she still loses the election in this dynasty change. The outside world will inevitably have some ideas, whether the Zushan lineage is deliberately suppressing that rising the swift green cypress peak. Many sects and immortal mansions with a long history will face a similar situation, and the closer ones such as the fall of power in the Jingxian Temple of Qingjing Peak, and the anti-customer of Zhuiqing Peak are the main ones. A little further away the Zhuji sect, one of the vassal forces of Xingyang Mountain, is in a similar situation. The current leader Guo Huifeng is in a similar situation. In fact, she is not from the line of the founder of the mountain, so she is like Liang. Jizushan monks like Yuping have more or less ideas in their hearts. This is like the future of Luobao Mountain. Even if it is a conservative estimate, it is very certain that Ningji will become an Ascension realm in the future, and Ningji is probably an extremely young Ascension realm, who was born out of nowhere and is terrifying. But the trouble is not small. Ningj's avenues have already decided that he will not let Qin Pingan and Luopeishan worry about his future cultivation path. This is a bit similar to the fact that the old Xiucai took Lu Shirlu as his direct disciple, but when Qin Pingan's brother Jun Qian, when he worshipped the old Xiucai as his master, in addition to the high enough cultivation realm, the key is that the self has become clear, plus the old scholar was in full swing at that time, so apart from some gossip on the mountain, it would not cause too much substantial damage to the lineage of Wenxing. But Ning Jis' life situation, especially his character, is full of countless unknowns. Young hidden officials who have just been able to relax a little, I am afraid that they will have to wait for decades. There was Pei Chen in the front, Ningji in the back. Haha, Lu Chen rolled up a large piece of noodles with chopsticks, and instantly became in a good mood. His cheeks bulged and he took a few breaths. While eating noodles, Lu Chen vaguely suggested, "The mountain relies on the mountains to eat the water. There are so many wild vegetables in the mountains and there are many fish in the wuxi, so next time I make a casserole as a late-night snack, it will be good, especially it's that kind of winter when it's freezing outside, the heat in front of you is overwhelming, and the taste is absolutely amazing. If you have a brazier at your feet, you will scald a jar of rice wine or glutinous rice wine, tsk, just thinking about it makes your mouth water." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "It's difficult. Naturally, it's not that the casserole is difficult to make, but that it is difficult for you, Lu Chen, to eat it. Now that things are going on in the world and there are undercurrents in the Qingming world, Lu Chen, the headmaster of Baiyujing, is unlikely to stay here for a long time." Previously, Cui Dongshan sent a secret letter to Luopeishan, and on it was written the list of the latest 10 candidates in Qingming world. How to see it, Baiyujing did not dare to take it lightly. Lu Chen sighed sullenly, then raised his head and asked casually, "Qin Pingan, do you remember the first time you drank? When was it?" Qin Pingan thought about it and said, "I used to practice boxing and couldn't bear the hardship. It seems that I borrowed the drink from Weibo. After that, I got out of control and I couldn't stop drinking." Lu Chen smiled and asked, "I'm always curious about something. Do you really like drinking?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Anyone who would ask this kind of question looks like he doesn't like drinking." Lu Chen took out a few salted duck eggs from his sleeves and put them on the table. "It's a local specialty called gaoyu. It's very famous. It's the duck from Huazhen Lake and the one in Huazhen." Qin Pingan took duck eggs and smashed them lightly without being polite to Master Lu. Lu Xinshin sighed, "Grandmasters are everywhere, real people are flying all over the sky, and the scene in the next 1,000 years, you and I are not walking on the Shanin Dao, what else could it be?" Qin Pingan nodded and said, "I can't see enough." Lu Chen said, "Gukan revisited his hometown, and now he is in Shujian Lake." Qin Pingan nodded. Lu Chen is like a well-informed ear report god. In the wild world, only because of the wild cultivator with the secret name of the Tao, two groups of people meet on a narrow road, one kills the other and neither gives way just because it is in the wild and heavenly. The 10 people have taken advantage of the time and place, so the 2 people who have made the most of this escape from the predicament, one is Chao Ci, who has risen to the top of the gods. Of course there is no suspense, and then there is Gu Kan. They all made people look at each other with admiration. In the end they were able to win thanks to Gu Kan. If it weren't for Gu Kan, this fight would still have to be fought, and the winner would not have been decided so quickly. I think that Chunqing and Subai are young now. The light-hearted pride of heaven is both grateful and fearful to his peer Gu Kan, and his feelings are very complicated. As for how Gu Kan made an extraordinary contribution, relying on a handful of old locust leaves that are like chicken ribs and have been treasured for many years, Zhao Xiaoxianxi, Subai, and Chao Ci are like divine help. As for Yu Aofu and Chunqing, although their surnames are unfamiliar and they were not able to directly benefit from Huaiyi, they could be said to have followed suit, because Gu Kan hid deeply and the incident happened suddenly. There was a deviation, and Chao Ci found an opportunity, relying on Wu Yun, handed out a punch equivalent to the 11th realm, and completely shattered the Great Formation. Gu Kan also abducted a female cultivator who was one of the 10 heavenly workers in the wilderness. Her name was Ziwu Meng and her name was Chun Xiao. Hey, sure enough, if there is a teacher there must be an apprentice. Mr. Zheng kidnapped an entire city of Jinsui. As an apprentice he also likes to follow suit. When Qin Pingan heard this he stopped the chopsticks in his hand, frowned slightly and asked, "What is he doing at Shujian Lake?" Lu Chen smiled and said, "In Shujian Lake I didn't go to Lu Zimeo's Xianxia Island, nor did I go to Zenji's Wudao School, but I just met senior sister Tianhujuan Huang Li Dao Zhongsu. The last one was a vulgar in a city by the lake. The young man was unable to read books. He relied on the strength of his waist and feet to be his husband, and he joined those dignitaries, literati and scholars who came to Shujian Lake to visit the landscape. Earning some hard money every day, Guken nostalgic after finding this young man who used to be a neighbor who often chatted, he lent a sum of money to the young man and planned to open a shop together. In this way, why is Guken also a second shopkeeper? When Qin Pingan heard this, there was a little smile in his eyes. Lu Qin held chopsticks in one hand and shook his sleeve with the other, pretending to pinch his fingers and calculate the fortune-telling. It is reasonable to say that after getting out of trouble, it should have been drinking celebration wine, but Guken turned his face and didn't recognize anyone and ran to fight Chao Ci. Stalking and stalking, Guken became more and more angry. Chao Ci had to punch a little bit harder. Guken was seriously injured. Qin Pingan said, "Who lie?" Lu Qin nodded, "I'm a little confused. It's not good to provoke anyone, but I want to provoke Chao Ci." While Headmaster Lu was chatting with Master, Zhao Xuxia just ate supper silently. It was the first time that Ningji heard about Gukan and that Chao Ci, so he was a little curious. Lu Qin turned his head and smiled. "This Chao Ci is amazing. You are an old enemy of your master, and it is your master's martial arts path. Now, in the battle between Chao Ci and your master, there is still a gambling game, and I don't know how many gods on the mountain have bet on it, spending a lot of money." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "I have never won against Chao Ci once, and all the questions have been lost. However, no one can fault Chao Ci's character. I don't have a relationship with him that is both an enemy and a friend. There is no hostility or hatred, just friends." Ningji nodded and said, "Mr. is a scholar who aims to be immortal. Fighting and killing in the arena is not his job. This time I followed Headmaster Lu on a strange trip, and it didn't go in vain." The teenager learned a lot of sayings and books. The young man's implication was that if Mr. Qin devoted himself to learning martial arts and boxing, he would be able to outperform Chao Ci. Qin Pingan smiled and nodded, "That's right." Zhao Xuxia laughed dumbly. No matter how much he respects his master, Zhao Xuxia doesn't think that if master focuses on boxing, he will definitely be able to win that Chao Ci. Julien once joked with Zhao Xuxia in private, that in the next 100 years, Chao Ci will be in the martial arts. Maybe he claims to be the second in the world and no one dares to call himself the first in the world. Zhao Xuxia was naturally a bit depressed at the time. If Chao Ci was at the top of the martial arts, so invincible in the world, how should his master handle himself? Julien then half-jokingly said, "Why does Chao Ci claim to be the second in the world?" Zhao Xuxia is not the kind of person who is active in thinking and good at debating, so he couldn't answer for a while. Julien asked himself and answered, maybe Chao Ci was too powerful, and no one could decide the winner with him, but Chao Ci always felt that there was someone who could compete with him for the first place. But in this fight, the two sides must be divided between life and death to decide the real outcome. So it can only be someone from later who competes with the former Chao Ci for the first place. Zhao Xuxia nodded. At that time, his mind was full of his master, whom he respected like a god. Naturally, he felt that only a master could compete with Chao Ci. Julien smiled and said, "Is that person a mountain master who is bound to practice Taoism on the mountain for a long time? Where are you, Zhao Xuxia? Isn't he also a pure martial artist?" Lu Qin admired Ningji even more. "You young man, you haven't officially apprenticed to the teacher yet, and you haven't gone to Luopao Mountain yet." After going there, Ningji met the old cook Julien, the younger senior brother Cui Dongshan, the senior elder sister Pei Qian, especially Jialao Shenxian. The atmosphere of Luopa Mountain is so strange. Sure enough, it's not that the family doesn't enter the house. Qin Pingan suddenly asked Lu Qin, "Do you think the great ditch of Tonggishao can be successfully excavated?" Lu Qin smiled without hesitation. "The world and the earth all work together, how could it not be possible? It's just such a big feat and small bumps are inevitable, so it's a good thing." Qin Pingan raised the white bowl and handed it to Lu Qin. "Let's borrow your auspicious words, let's go." Lu Qin raised the white bowl and gently bumped against it. "Hello brothers, let's go one by one." Qin Pingan opened a school here. Being a teacher is really more arduous than returning to the upper 5 realms. Lu Qin asked with his heart, "Is there a demon that determines the bottleneck of the nascent soul realm?" It seems to be nonsense, since Qin Pingan has already tried to break through the realm in Mi Xiefeng's dojo, and more than once, how can he not encounter inner demons? But Qin Pingan nodded and replied in a deep voice, "It's almost certain." The night wind in the mountains was cool and cool. Lu Qin held the wine bowl and looked at the string of slightly swaying but silent bells under the eaves of the school. The corner of Zhang Lu's eyes was on the young warrior who would be very inconspicuous when he stayed by Qin Pinggan's side, under Zhao Shu. It can even be said that Lu Qin appeared this time to a large extent to chat with this Zhao Shuxiao, who is very similar to Qin Pinggan. Because it is too similar, it falls in the eyes of some experts just like a fake calligraphy and painting. At most it gets the evaluation of the next level authentic work. But Lu Qin is not among that some. It was also at the wine table, compared to that in the Fanhuan mansion of Huan Mountain, the female warrior with the ball-shaped hair in a bun, Qin Ping's great disciple. Lu Qin was even more worried about this close disciple on the road of Qin Pinggan's martial arts. It's not that Zhao Shuxia's martial arts achievements will definitely be higher than that of Pei Qian. Before Zhao Shuxiao was there to send Zhaoling to practice boxing, Lu Qin did some rough calculations. Zhao Shuxia's martial arts height was indeed, and it couldn't be higher than senior sister Pei Qian. After all, Pei Qian is now a martial artist of the limit, and Zhao Shuxia is a martial artist of the 5 realms who has just broken through for a few days, a pure martial artist who is destined to miss the word strongest in this life. Therefore, Lu Qin's admiration for Zhao Shuxia was just an unreasonable intuition, and the intuition of a cultivator like Lu Qin was itself a profound truth. After supper, Zhao Shuxia and Ning Ji cleaned up the dishes. Qin Pinggan and Lu Qin continued to drink, but this time the drink was the soil shochu brewed by Qin Pinggan from a certain Mengtong's house on the mountain. There are also guests, which can be described as neighbors. It was the newly appointed Shimei River water god, Gao Niu, who had just acquired a rare treasure. This river god, who looks like an old scribe, is holding an empty wine jug in his arms. Previously, this object was discovered by the servants of the government who were patrolling the waters. Seeing it floating on the Shimei River, the servants who moved the water actually moved and captured it. No, I couldn't move my strength, so I reported to my superiors and officials, and let these Shuefu assistants with the title of Narcissus, running the water method still can't change the drifting route of the jug down the water. I never thought that the river was high. As soon as the brewer came out, he was caught by his hand. He only felt that the jug seemed to be a living creature with enlightenment. He threw it out, but it stuck to his hand and he couldn't throw it away. Around a group of Narcissus officials and shrimp soldiers and crab generals, they didn't know what to do, and the roaring beards and horses naturally made a loud noise. Gao Niu calmed down and found that the hot potato-like jug in his hand didn't seem to be unusual, but rather had a mysterious feeling of a great road. On the school side at the source of the Meha River, if there are objects with unknown origins and hidden murderous intentions, it is better to ask the well-informed Lord Yingguan to help them take them out. It is reasonable to say thank you in person. When Qin Pinggan saw the jug, he kept calm, smiled and waved, "Brother Gao, come and sit here." Having obtained the decree of Lord Yingguan, Gao Nyang first trotted quickly, but then slowed down when he approached the wine table. I had already glimpsed an empty wine jug on the table. Gao Nyang was relieved. It was the exact same shape as the wine jug in his hand. Ning Ji, a newly admitted student of the school. Qin Pinggan took advantage of Gao Niu's quick and slow experience and introduced with a smile. This Taoist Lu is a strange person with exquisite Taoism, but he looks young, not old. Lu Qin hurriedly put down his chopsticks, wiped his mouth, still sitting, turned sideways, cupped his fists and smiled. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I have met Master River God, Xiaodao and Mr. Chen are close friends who share weal and woe." Gao Niu hurriedly bowed and saluted. Little God Gao Niu, thanks to Mr. Chen's care, is temporarily serving as the water of Shimei River, and it is an honor to meet Lu Xianchang, Lord Yingguan's friend on the mountain. Can it be bad? Not to mention bowing and kowtowing a few times, isn't that the proper courtesy and friendship? Just saying that last time, I drank here with you Huiting, the female cultivator of Fengshua Temple. After that, Gao Nyang was fortunate to participate in a secret discussion about the Dragon Palace matter. He was quite kind, and after chatting a few more words, how bright his face was, and even the cultivators of Dali who accompanied the army looked at him a few times. Zhao Shuxia brought another bamboo chair over and said with a smile, "Mr. Gao, please take a seat." Gao Nyang quickly thanked him because he had a jug in his hand, so he had to take the chair with one hand. Ning Ji had already got up and sat down with Zhao Shuxia with the chair. Lu Qin said, "Brother Gao, is this bringing wine?" Gao Niu's face suddenly became embarrassed. Qin Pinggan helped relieve the siege and said, "This kind of treasure, if it goes down with the water, is naturally obtained by those who are destined to get it." Gao Nyang was secretly delighted in his heart. The treasure light flashed and the jug fell off his hand. Gao Nyang quickly reached out to catch it, but he didn't care about anything. A green rope was tied around his waist. Lu Qin smiled and said, "Distant relatives are not as good as close neighbors, and if the neighbors can be harmonious, Brother Gao is good fortune." Gao Niu nodded vigorously and said, "Blessed, being able to be neighbors with Lord Yingguan is a blessing from a little god." Zhao Shuxia has brought a white bowl to Gao Nyang. Ningji was just curious about the honorific title given by the river to Mr. Qin. Is it some kind of official position? Qin Pingan smiled and said, "The good fate in the world, one after another, is mutual." Li people are not surprised. Gao Niu said nothing, drank 2 bowls of soil brewing water in a row, and toasted with the young Yingguan and Lu Xianchang respectively. "Since I'm not good at words, my sincere love is full of love and it's all in the drink." "You didn't expect the wine to be so strong?" Gao Jiu took a sip and wondered, "Where did the soil shochu come from? The wine is so domineering?" Qin Pingan returned a bowl. Lu Qin just took a sip of wine from the bowl and sighed, "Seeing Brother Gao tonight, it reminds Xiao Dao of an old friend who is also surnamed Gao, Gao Gu, Lonely Gu. Gao brother, you are the brewer of wine. He has few friends and only a handful of friends. He always likes to say that the body is not a relative, let alone a foreign object, but he likes to drink alone. But he has never been drunk in his life. I think you have some fate." Gao Jiu quickly held the bowl in both hands. "The friends who want to come to Lu Xianchang are all Daomen immortals above the sea of clouds, and the goddess of the river with thin eyebrows. How dare you climb high?" Gao Jiu's polite words are really not wrong. Lu Qin's so-called old friend Gao Gu is indeed not an old Taoist immortal that he can easily climb. Qingming Qianxia Difei Mountain Huayang Palace, Yuzhou Taoist priest Gao Gu, Taoist named Jiyue, one of the 10 people in Qingming Tiantian, very hopeful to become one of the 14 realms with the help of alchemy. There was no delicacy on the small table, only a few plates of snacks. Zhao Shuxia and Ningji were just chewing on the dried sweet potatoes sent by an elder Meng Tong. Gao Niu soon learned the young Taoist's ability to talk about the idle world. He was really able to chat, and there was a table of people just listening to him talking about the mountains over there. How big are the heavens and the earth? How many sentient beings? The human world has been in the world for thousands of years, but it is here and now. Brother Gao, you and I can meet and drink the village wine at this moment. This kind of fate, if you don't teach the bottle in front of you to be full and empty, you can. It's beyond words. Hey, what I said is bad. There is no seniority at the wine table, no matter how good or bad one's background is. It only depends on the quality of the wine, and what's more, Brother Gao, why should you be humble? Your face is very accurate. Although you are old, you are not too late. You look like a scholar who has read poetry and books, but you are not pedantic. You are born with a posthumous title. Jianghu Jingshin, what constraints do you have in life and death? Old eyes can't read a book, so what if you don't stop talking? You can't stop talking about things, and you're full of courage. The horses are in blue shirts and thousands of people are shouting. The emperor was in a hurry back then. Chickens and dogs live in the same boat. Who is the guest and who is the master? I admire it, and when I look up, it's already a legacy, and I can't help but rejoice in it. It's a legacy, and those who look at it later will also feel it and feel it. Brother Gao, you and I are both Taoist friends. As a momentary official and a long-term spectator, you must not leave one. Drunk in the countryside at the wine table and get immortality? Gao Niu occasionally answered a few words. He was pleased with the approachable nature of the young Taoist priest, but there was a little bit of disagreement in his heart. Could it be that he met his peers and rivals tonight? This Lu Xianchang has experience in the officialdom? Otherwise, how can you blow it better than yourself? At the beginning, when the Taoist priest talked about the high-brewed wine, Master River God would quickly mention one, and drink a bowl or half of a bowl of soil burnt, but no matter how good the amount of alcohol is, it can't bear the one statement after another of Taoist Lu. Such persuasion is really true. It's a bit more powerful. After all, in such a once-in-lifetime wine situation, he always has to put aside his identity to really drink. Besides, Lord Yingguan has begun to help himself to stop drinking. The reason is lame, saying that they drink it. There is not much left over for the city's earth and fire, so I have to have some left over so that I can drink and refresh myself while preparing for the class. At the end of Zhaoji's drinking, his face changed slightly, and he quickly pleaded guilty with a sound. His footsteps were unsteady, and he staggered to the distance of the school to vomit. The Lord River God did not dare to use his magical powers to dispel the alcohol, but he did not forget to reach out and wave his sleeves to dispel the odor. Qin Pingan also drank and blushed and said with an angry smile, "Master Lu really wants to add water transport to the Shimei River. Anyway, change the method." Lu Qin smiled and said, If Gao Nyang knew the truth, he would be able to drink the wine you have here and then vomit and drink again, and he would be willing to vomit out his heart and liver. It turned out that Gao Brewery drank a few taels of wine on the wine table, and a Shime River could add a few pounds of water transportation. Lu Qin clasped the back of his head with both hands, leaned back against the bamboo chair, hiccups, looked up at the sky and murmured, "Zhaojia's wine table is probably our world 10,000 years ago." After Gao Nyo vomited, he just felt refreshed, returned to the wine table, and took the initiative to ask for wine. Together with Chen Yingguan and Lu Daochang, the three of them drank a full 3 pots, or maybe 4 pots of immortal brewing water. As for where the drink came from, the river god, who is very observant, can't remember clearly. Anyway, he just remembered that he had drunk it completely, so he rolled up his sleeves and slammed with the Daochang Lu, and finally Gao Brewing slapped his head heavily. The desktop fell into a deep sleep, snoring like thunder. Zhao Shuxia and Ning Ji didn't drink, they couldn't sleep anyway, so they had gone for a walk together long ago. Lu Qin looked at Qin Pingan, whose eyes were shining brightly, and scolded with a smile. "You are too bullying for your alcohol intake, and it has nothing to do with alcohol." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "I advise you to drink? No matter how bad the wine is, it can't be worse than you." The more he drank, the more sober Qin Pingan became. He really never got drunk a few times in his life, and he was very drunk. It seemed that he was only drunk once in Huangliangfu land when he was young. Later he went to find Su Yuanxia and got drunk that time too. Just as Lu Qin was about to speak, he raised his hand, covered his mouth and ran. After a while, he swaggered back to the wine table and slumped on the bamboo chair. "It's been a long time since I drank like this. I remember the last time, it was a long time ago." At that time, on the wine table of the small alley restaurant, there was the city lord of Xinxiao City who returned to his hometown from Baiyujing. Yao Kejio, whose Taoist name was Ancient. Besides Lu Qin, there was also Sun Huaizhong, the Xuandu Guan. Huayang Palace is high and lonely. The wine was also drowsy and dizzy. After that, Yao Kejio said that Sun Guanju helped Lu Qin to leave the wine table, but Gao Gu said that it was Lu Qin who was carried away by Yao Kejio, and Sun Guanju said that he personally pulled Lu Qin's leg and left. Alleys, so the alleys full of chicken and dog that night were extraordinarily clean. Lu Qin took out a porcelain bottle, poured out a few fragrant medicinal pills, slapped it into his mouth, chewed it, and then handed out the porcelain bottle to Chen Pingan, smiling, "If you can hangover, you can stop dizziness immediately." Chen Pingan, who was still able to bear it hard, somehow when he heard about the hangover and dizziness, his stomach began to churn. The ground vomited towards the stream for a while. Returning to the seat, he also leaned against the back of the chair like Lu Qin, reaching out and rubbing his stomach lightly. Gao Jio was still snoring. Lu Qin picked up his chopsticks again, picked up the last few snacks on the plate and said with a smile, "It is rare for a cultivator to get drunk a few times. How do you think of Ningji this year?" "That's how we thought of Qin Pingan back then." Lu Qin said, "If I set up a stall in the town and told you that I would be like today, would you believe it?" In fact, many of the younger generation of Lizhu Dongtian went to the gambling table early, and there were even a few of the heavens' favorites. It was only at the last moment that they lost all their bets. Chen Pingan said, "Being able to achieve today's achievements and getting here step by step, luck is a big factor." Lu Qin smiled, "Nowadays there may be 99 out of 100 people in the world, and the remaining one is either an old acquaintance like me or someone close to Luopao Mountain. After all, the saying goes, I should only have 8 liters of rice in my life, and I am dissatisfied with fighting all over the world." Qin Pingan nodded. Lu Qin picked up his chopsticks, glanced at Gao Jiao and said with a smile, "In the future you have to remind him, take a chopstick and dish out a plate, and change the stinky problem of shaking 3 times in the air, and the people at the same table look so tired and crooked." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "It's just too much." Lu Qin put down his last chopsticks and chewed the appetizers carefully. Life is like a tree with 1,000 flowers just falling with the wind, each has its own place, and it will fall to the ground and grind it into dust under the tree, like a person's hometown of death. There are also those who drift along with the water and go to distant places like a wanderer who does not return to their hometown. There are also those who fall on the bed mat after passing through the doors and windows, and those who fall into the mixed juice after entering the fence. You Confucian sages say that this is not cause and effect. In fact, in my opinion, it is not a rut. The ancients who are great still can't get out of it. That Gao Nyo suddenly woke up and shouted loudly, "If the fate comes, meet it." After he finished speaking, he fell back to sleep, and Master River God did not forget to reach out and touch the flask around his waist. Qin Pingan was taken aback. Is he really drunk? Fake sleep? Lu Qin couldn't help laughing and said with a smile, "He'll just say Brother Gao is a true learner. In a daze he tells the truth when drunk, but that's all." A fallen-out mountain with two gatekeepers, Zheng Dafeng and Taoist Xianhui. Xiaomo, the wild Baijing who goes by the pseudonym Xiego, these two sword cultivators in the Ascension realm, one peak and one consummation. And that white-haired boy, the newly appointed genealogist Kong Ho, is a transmutation demon from the Ascension realm. Coupled with those young people who have entered Luopao Mountain one after another, the children are all like grass and trees when spring is sprouting, thriving and good for all things. Lu Qin said, "Before at the top of Splashing Mo Peak, Chao Rong asked me a question, whether the 3 or 4 disputes within the Confucian Temple were more inclined to the literati." Qin Pingan asked with a smile, "What's the truth?" Lu Qin said to himself, "It is said that in ancient times, there was no difference between day and night in the eyes of gods. For 10,000 years in future generations now on the mountain, only the little master who made the characters, the Howran ritualist who cast the cauldron, separated the heaven and the earth, and then the heaven and earth were connected. In fact, this move of Li Sheng has completely cut off the possibility of human Taoist priests entering the 16th realm. The patriarchs of the 3 sects are well aware of this, especially my master." 10,000 years ago, before the Riverside discussion, he calculated this result. When the human world and the human heart are divided into good and evil, there is a real difference between heaven and earth. So Wensheng's human nature is inherently evil, and it seems that he is in confrontation with Yasheng's human nature, but in fact, it is based on this and Yasheng's strength to once again open up the world. Hearing this, Qin Pingan hesitated for a while, but still didn't take out the drink. "In the school I made a rule for myself not to use magic." Lu Qin smiled and said, "Do you know why Wensheng is most partial to you, a closed disciple?" Qin Pingan remained silent. Lu Qin said slowly, "Chui Yu is too smart, so he has no patience with the stupid people in the world, plus he sees the long term, so he is full of anxiety about the whole world. He once wanted to make an end with the world. But in the end, he chose to shake hands with the world that disappointed him, and to leave without saying goodbye to all the people he cared about. Chui Yu should go to study Buddhism with great concentration, treat all beings with an equal heart, and then overcome the barriers of writing and completely detach from the barriers of heaven and earth. For him it is easy. The left and right are always tolerant to the vulgar people in the mountains, otherwise he will not be alone and visit immortals at sea, just worry that his sword chi will affect the mountains and rivers in various places. However, he has always had a bad temper when dealing with chi practitioners on the mountain, because he has a bad temper in his heart. Deep down, I always felt that a Taoist cultivator should have a matching Taoism. In short, it is a person's deeds which must be equivalent to their knowledge. Therefore, after practicing swordsmanship, the higher the swordsmanship, the more alive he is. It became more and more tangled because he felt that as if the swordsmanship was high, it would not help. Left and right should go to the deep mountains to learn Taoism, leave behind benevolence, righteousness, courtesy, wisdom and faith, and only seek Taoism and virtue. Lu Shirlu, because of his background and age, when he looked at the human world, there was no distinction between good and evil at first. Even if he worshipped the old Xiucai as his teacher, he only recognized the old Xiucai, that's all. So your senior Jun Chen can actually become a god, at least the height of the 12 high-ranking gods in ancient times. Qi Jingchen, what a pity. As for you. Having said that, Lu Qin picked up an empty jug on the table, raised his head, shook it vigorously, smashed his mouth and said with a smile, "Qin Pingan, you are so pitiful." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Lu Qin, I have been friends for many years, don't bother me. There is no suitable vulgar rhyme, and the nature loves Qiushan. The middle-aged is quite good, and the late home is Nanshan. The old one is more forgetful, but the lovesickness is not forgotten." Lu Qin picked up the bamboo chopsticks, knocked on the wine bowl and sang leisurely, "Those who abandon me will not stay on the day of yesterday, and those who disturb my heart will be troubled today. Touch the fish, embroider the curtains in the spring breeze, and treat the dogwood once a year. Listen to the songs of the mountain ghosts, and the year is turning into the night. The wine keeps people drunk, and the world is drunk with the king, and the plum blossoms elsewhere." At the wine table, apart from Lu Chen's voice, Qin Pingan never said a word, only Gao Ying's thunderous snoring. Not far away, Zhao Shuxia and Ning Ji were already on their way back to the school. There was an old tree on the bank with lush foliage and the old green was dripping. Along the way, the two people who have almost decided their identities as apprentices and brothers, although they don't talk much about each other, they chat very well, probably because of their slightly different backgrounds but similar circumstances. In short, I have endured hardships in my youth and it is strong. It is almost like eating a few large dry biscuits and swallowing my stomach without drinking water. They stopped here. On the other side of the stream there was a small green pool. In the picture scroll of the long river, Ningji saw with his own eyes the young boy in the village who had good physical strength. With the hammer, he raised his arm high, and then hit the hammer the big and small stones, and the stream fish hidden at the bottom fainted. It must have been struck by lightning, almost floating on the surface of the water, being picked up and thrown into the fish basket. Some people choose the place where the swimming fish gather first, build a stone upstream as if to build a dam, and finally encircle a whole shallow pool. Ningji smiled and said, Lord Taoist Lu said that when a scholar is learning, he must know how to fish when the pond is dry, and to catch fish in the water. In fact, the same is true. Xianxia couldn't help laughing and laughing. Did Headmaster Lu say the wrong order? But Xianxia quickly frowned. Seeing that Xianxia had no intention of moving for the time being, Ningji had nothing to do, so he squatted on the shore, picked up the stones at hand and threw them into the small pool at will. Before Lu Daochang passed by this place, he casually said with a smile, later in the late spring, when all the flowers outside the mountain withered away, this tree was the only one that flourished, and it reached the edge of the stream. Xianxia heard the words, dry the sea and fish. Although he was just a pure warrior, he had no reason to think of a scene on the mountain. If you compare the fish in the stream to the chi trainer in the world, the flowing water pouring down from the mountains and condensing here, is regarded as the spiritual energy between heaven and earth. Swimming in water is a matter of course and right. Maybe you don't even know that water is water. So, if you are in the middle of heaven and earth, do chi practitioners also regard cultivating chi as a matter of course? Xiaoxia's gaze moved upward from the stream to the mountain, the top of the mountain, and finally the sky. Ningji finally asked, Brother Zhao, what are you thinking? Xiaoxia regained his senses, withdrew his gaze and smiled with the young man. It's nothing. They returned to the school together and held a very simple ceremony. It was nothing more than Qin Pingan sitting on a chair and drinking a bowl of tea brought by Ningji. Apart from the young apprentice brother Xiaoxia, the only person watching the ceremony was Lu Qin with his arms wrapped around his sleeves. Ningji kowtowed and Qin Pingan helped the boy up. At this moment, a poor and sour old man who was in trouble, quickly crossed the threshold and said with a smile, It's okay. Seeing that the opportunity was not good, Lu Qin wanted to apply oil on the soles of his feet, but the old scholar stood on tiptoes, put his arms around his neck, and forcibly hooked his shoulders with him. What are you going to do? It's rare for our brothers to meet each other, no eh? Lu Qin stretched out his hand and patted the old scholar's arm vigorously, and said decisively, I'm sorry, I'm busy with business, I'll get it back. The old scholar nodded to Qin Pingan and the others, smiling brightly, and at the same time dragged Headmaster Lu to the wine table outside the door and said, It's not bad for this wine, let's talk a little more about the quarrel. You have participated, I have participated, and both won, but in the morning and the evening, but unfortunately I didn't meet, I will make up for it today and chat while drinking. Already. Lu Qin raised his hands, Pindao admit defeat. The old Xiaoxia let go of his arms, twitched his beard and smiled and nodded, Master Lu is very bold and he admits defeat in half, and it must be a good talk to spread out in the future. Ningji looked bewildered. Qin Pingan smiled and said, It's your husband's husband. Ningji wanted to kowtow, but the old Xiaoxia quickly stepped forward and held the boy's arm. Don't, just make a bow, sincerity is enough. The young man turned his head to look at his husband. Qin Pingan nodded with a smile, and the young man bowed respectfully to the old scholar. The old man hurriedly shook his clothes and shook his sleeves, straightened his waist, smiled and accepted the salute. Preaching for teachers, seeking scholars and accepting careers, all must be calm. The teacher is rigorous in his studies and has a peaceful attitude. The students are respectful, courteous and calm in their studies. The old show was laughing from ear to ear, which is good. The old scholar who was pleased with Lao Hui turned his head and said with a smile to Lu Qin, Just don't worry, this kind of thing about admitting defeat tonight will never go out. Sword of Coming Chapter 1032. The young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown hurriedly bowed his thanks and said pitifully, I only ask the old scholar to keep his promise and don't accidentally say anything. There are only a few people in the school tonight. Although Qin Pingan is a closed disciple of an old scholar, his mouth is still very strict, and he never likes to talk behind his back. As for Zhao Xuxia and Ningji, one has a stable personality, the other I have a good relationship with myself, and I think it is unlikely that anyone will talk about this kind of thing, but the old scholar can't do anything, so don't go back to the Zhongtu Confucian temple, beating gongs and drums, setting off firecrackers and pulling banners, or you will be with Yuxian and Sui. Traveling around the mountains with these friends, chatting a few words, isn't it just that the words at the wine table are not true and one is careless? At that time, it will be spread to Qingming xianxia, and then it will be exaggerated through Xuanduguan. It is estimated that Lu Qin will have an extra nickname of Lu's half. The poor and sour old scholar in a Confucian shirt bowed his head and saluted. Where is it? Zhangjiao Lu is not good at making a name for himself. I have always been stupid and I really want to quarrel with my heart. Teacher Lu asked me to have one arm and one leg. There is no match for Headmaster Lu. This is the beginning of getting cheap and selling well? The old Xiaocai winked with Lu Qin, turned to Qin Pingan and the others said that they wanted to have a few whispers with Master Lu, and then walked out the door. The old Xiaocai was not tall, but Lu Qin was slender. Poor Headmaster Lu was dragged out by the old Xiaocai with his head tilted to the side. Good-tempered Taoist priests and generous old scholars seemed to be ranked fourth in their respective Taoist lines. Ningji was a little confused just because of the name Lu Qin and the identity of Headmaster by Yujing. Taoist Wu Di had already explained it to the young man in the capital of Xuanhuan, because he could understand Ningji even if he had called him. For example, now Ningji has a general idea of the weight of Lu Qin on the mountain. In simple terms, Lu Qin is one of the most important figures in the world, but for some reason Taoist Lu, whose hometown is here, is in the Baiyujing. Nanhua City is one of the headmasters of Taoism. Then the unmasked grandfather of his own family seems to be able to gain the upper hand on Daochang Lu's side? Qin Pingan had drank apprentice tea before. According to his seniority, this old gentleman who was called Sir by Mr. Lu, and who was called Old Xiaocai by Zhangjiao Lu, was Ningji's grandfather. Ningji lowered her voice and asked curiously, "Hey, quarrel?" Qin Pingan explained with a smile. Mr. deliberately made it simple and easy, but it was actually a serious debate. Both Mr. and Lu Qin participated in the 100-year-old debate on the three religions of Confucianism, Buddhism and Taoism, but it was not the same debate. They had a finale and an opening and they all won very convincing, but later their realm and status were high, and they stopped participating in the debate according to the rules, so they didn't meet. Ningji continued to ask, "Sir, what is the result of the debate between the patriarch and Daochang Lu?" Qin Pingan thought for a while and said some fair and impartial words. "Not necessarily, the outcome is hard to say. Lu Chenxian Wang Yang is unrestrained, the best at fables, there is no one majestic, really no one, the enemy is like a heavy rain falling from the sky. Ordinary people are in the wild, there is no way to hide and there is no way to avoid them. Those who are hostile are like those who face a flood and break their banks, and those who are sincerely convinced are like a long drought and rain, and the fish that dry up the land will return. The river. The teacher is reasonable in his teaching with a clear context and stable sequence. Besides, his literary style is also excellent, but it is not the kind of gorgeous words. It is like paving the road ahead and the future generations can follow." Hearing this, Ningji breathed a sigh of relief. He hoped that Patriarch was very knowledgeable and had great debates. He also didn't want Lu Dao to lose. A tie would be best, and it would be better not to quarrel at all. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Writing has always been abhorrent. Mr. used to teach in a poor alley for many years and he was very poor. Every time he bought books, paper and pen, he had to pay attention to the budget. The Marquis of Jinha borrowed food." Although he said it lightly, in fact, Qin Pingan just said that he was very nervous and did not exaggerate at all. Just because once Mr. and Lu Qin formally discussed the Tao, it will have immeasurable consequences for the two worlds. A small accident, the Confucian temple when Sheng and the head teacher Lu Qin seemed to meet by chance in a village school, it will bring countless far-reaching inevitables to the next millennium. Of course, Qin Pingan didn't want his husband to quarrel with Lu Qin for himself. At the critical moment when the three religious mountains and rivers are about to separate into countless tributaries and branches, Lu Qin is of course even more reluctant to have a debate with Wen Sheng, because the two sides are destined to have no winner, only lose both. When the old scholar is ruthless, he can at least delay or even block Lu Qin's 15th realm. Of course, Wen Sheng himself will pay a very painful price. Those who can do this have seen several worlds, indeed they are not one-handed, at most one or two people, and the old show just happens to be on this list. So this time, I hurried back to Howran World from the outside world. It was also an extremely tough statement made by the old scholar and headmaster Lu Qin, or the entire Baiyujing or the Taoist ancestor. As an accomplice, you must also protect the way for the closed disciples who have not yet reached the top and are walking on the mountain road. It's just that the other party is Lu Qin, who is better off doing more than one thing, so the old scholar is still very careful. If you give me face, I will give you face. It is only said that the old show has helped Yu Xian to successfully merge the Taoist galaxy, and then fetch the river map. Whether it is Taoist or Taoist, in short, the entire Taoist sect must accept this love. Generally speaking, Taoist priests can do nothing, and it does not concern themselves. Hang up, but Lu Qin and his master, Daozu, have their identities over there, so naturally they can't be so careless. On a small wine table, the old xiaotsai and Lu Qin sat opposite each other. The old xiaotsai took out 2 wine glasses and placed them on the table. He smiled and asked Master Lu to take out 2 pots of good wine from Qingming Tianxia, and Lu Qin took it out from his sleeve. The 2 pots were made from Immortal Brewing in the Biyun Tower of Baiyujing and Huayang Palace in Difei Mountain respectively. They were each filled with a glass of wine. The old scholar praised each other for his virtuous heart, like jade hidden in the mountains. Xiaokai's good words, but said that in the room next to Qin Pingan, the house is full of books, and the taste of books is better than that of raising fish in water. In the past, Yaxing once traveled to the world of Qingming. In addition to negotiating the matter of Koming's scattering in the Haoran world, Yaxing also had the will to preach in foreign countries and open academies, but he was in charge of the head teacher of Baiyujing for 100 years. It's Yu Do, and Yu Do doesn't like to deal with common affairs. He has been in the sky for a long time, confronted with demons all the year round, and he is too lazy to meet Yisheng, so it is a few respected Baiyujing priests and Yisheng secretly discussing matters, so there is no way. Negotiate. But in fact, if Baiyujing Taoist officials could have calculated that the ancestors of the 3 sects were scattered, they would never have refused it. Now, of course, the one who benefits the most is the contention of 100 schools of thought, especially Buddhist temples and Taoist temples. The world is magnificent. The reason why those Baiyujing Taoist officials did not agree to Yaxing back then was that apart from worrying that Confucian forces would spread their branches and leaves in the world and get out of hand, there was actually a great cultivator who would think about things and get farther and farther from the truth. The reason may be replaced by the river god Gaojiu, who has been in officialdom and public practice, but can see the truth at a glance. That is, just because the headmaster Yu Do did not show up, Baiyujing will think that this is Yu Do. The attitude of the headmaster has changed. Since Yu Do doesn't nod his head, then there is no need to discuss it. As one of the only 2 remaining headmasters in Baiyujing, Lu Qin, of course, can facilitate this matter. The big deal is to go to Tianweishan to have a few words with senior brother Yu Do, and then send a message to the 12th floor of Baiyujing's 5 cities. It is nothing more than an extra trip. It's just that Lu Qin didn't know why, but he pretended not to know about it and was just traveling abroad, going to Xuanduguan to discuss and criticize, or looking for big monks like Gao Gu and Wu Shuangjiang to eat and drink. No one is as comfortable as Headmaster Lu, who communicates with each other without a trace. It is only said that after serving as the headmaster of Baiyujing, Lu Qin in the Qingming world did not seem to have done any feats in the worldly sense, far from being comparable to the previous 2 headmaster brothers. Occasionally deeds circulated, but also some absurd jokes. Mr. Wensheng, has he ever wasted a moment of time? Reading people and things is like watching mountains and rivers, and what he has done, where his deeds are, a scholar can influence countless scholars. This is not a feat, what is it? The old scholar scratched his head, held the cup in one hand again and sighed with a beard in the other. I don't know that old age is coming, and my head will turn white in an instant and I will be very old. Lu Qin smiled and said, looking back at this life-seeking Taoism, it is a blessing to think carefully. This kind of thing is just what Headmaster Lu said, but no one else can tell. Don't be angry when you wake up in the morning, don't scold Yusher's wife. Read more books on sages and hee when you are in trouble. Self-cultivation, the way of life, that's all. The old scholar was suddenly dumbfounded. Probably Qin Pingan saw that the wine table was really just chatting, so he walked to the door and asked the husband if he wanted to have a late-night snack. About to rebel. Seeing Qin Pingan standing without moving, the old scholar asked him to sit down and chat, drink a little if he could and drink tea if he couldn't. Qin Pingan nodded and sat at the table, while Zhao Shuxia and Ning Ji went to the kitchen to work for supper. They planned to fry a few more appetizers, and depending on the situation they are going to have a second drink. Lu Qin smiled and said, "You don't have to be so nervous, Mr. Wensheng and I can't quarrel." Generally speaking, the old scholar who is a husband said that he would talk to Lu Qin. As a student and disciple, Qin Pingan, who is both private and rational, should not be disturbed, and it is not in line with the rules. Probably this is the exclusive treatment of closed disciples. Lu Qin has also been a closed-door disciple for thousands of years, and he feels the same and must feel the same. Qin Pingan said angrily, "No quarrel, the initiative is in my husband's hands," and Chief Lu said it's a fart. The old scholar stroked his beard and smiled. "Listen, is it sincere or not, is it warm or not?" Lu Qin heard that Qin Pingan addressed himself as Taoist Lu rather than Headmaster Lu, and the content of his words was not obvious, so he didn't care. The old xianxia remembered something, touched his sleeves but found nothing, just looked up at Headmaster Lu. Lu Qin smiled and stretched out a finger and wiped it on his mouth, indicating that Pindao knew the rules and must be tight-lipped. Only then did the old scholar figure out a copy of the river map. After all, he did it in a hurry. The true meaning of arithmetic contained in it may not exist in 10. The old xianxia reminded Qin Pingan not to open it in a hurry, and it would not be too late to return to the upper 5 realms one day. Now if you open the scroll and read the content, a Taoist heart will only be deeply immersed in it. That is, his own closed disciple who has cultivated his mind successfully so that the old show can be trusted. Otherwise, if you are an ordinary chi practitioner, even if you are an immortal, you can't take this picture of the river which is just a copy. People. Qin Pingan nodded and put it into his sleeve silently, as if he was unrestrained on the wine table. He made an exception to cast the magic technique once. Over the desk. The old scholar smiled and said, "It's a good thing to like to study arithmetic in arithmetic. In the future, when you travel to the Middle Earth and Divine Continent, you can ask the old ancestors of the art masters for advice. They owed your senior brother a lot of favor back then. If you have any questions, just feel free to ask. Don't be afraid to ask. If you ask them, it will be a new incense relationship. Little Treasure Bottle, Yugan, and Ningji and other children, you can ask those old masters for teaching questions confidently in the future." The old xianxia took out another temporarily intercepted picture of time, and he did not intend to keep it for a long time. Lu Qin knows the good intentions of the old scholar, and the great monks on the mountain are often better known than meeting each other. Since Qin Pingan will definitely go to the Qingming world in the future, he should take a look at some Qingming monks with his own eyes as soon as possible. Hear what they have to say. Above the picture scroll, beyond that day the galaxy is boundless and the mind is vast. The old scholar squatted on top of the gourd and sighed, sighing every time he took a sip of wine. Just seeing Wenxing, who is only a fraction of his age, the old man who left the Biyun Tower in Baiyujing also smiled and said hello to the old scholar. This is probably Wenxing's unique card face. Just like Lu Qi came here before, obviously to congratulate Yu Xian, only because the old show was present, and when he spoke he had to put Wenxing before Yu Xian. That is to say, it is a kind of attention to the landscape and officialdom, and it can also be said to be an indispensable worldly manner, and of course, it is a sincere recognition of the literary and sage culture. The old xianxia stood up, bowed and smiled. "I have seen Huang Lao Shenxian. Huang Jiesho, the Taoist name on the Golden and Jade genealogy in Baiyujing, is Wang, because the surname is Huang, and the Taoist ancestor once gave a plaque for the study of Huang Jieshu's library, so the old man has always been self-confident." Oh, Xuanhuan. It was the previous owner of Biyun Tower, and the next 2 owners were disciples of this old real person. At that time, Huang Jieshu voluntarily stepped down as the landlord, and the old real person just went to sit in a Xianhu palace. In fact, he was guarding the one who was arrested by Baiyu, the Xianxia cave where Jing used to imprison prisoners. The old scholar smiled and asked, "How does the old fairy come here so leisurely?" Huang Jieshu pointed to the few keys left on his waist and said with a smile, "To be honest with Wenxing, Pindao can be said to have nothing to worry about now." It turned out that not long ago the old real person handed over the only remaining Taoist official identity, the palace master of Xianhu Palace. Huang Jieshu of Biyun Tower and Pang Ding, the city lord of Lingbao City with the Taoist name Humble Heart, are a senior, well-deserved Baiyujing old man. Baiyujing Taoist officials who are alive today, if not the kind of Taoist priests who are reincarnated in Baiyujing, and then return to Baiyujing to renew the incense and Taoism, in terms of seniority, the old man is second only to de Zhangjiao Koming, but also in the second palm. Before teaching Yudo. According to legend, when the old man was a teenager, he entered Baiyujing to practice Taoism only a few years ago. He was fortunate enough to travel with Taoist ancestors and headmaster Koming, and came to the outer world early. As for why the old xianxia is so polite, of course, it is not because of the other party's Taoist age and identity, but according to a certain statement of Xuanduguan Sun Taoist, Huang Jieshuo is one of the few good birds in Baiyujing, and has always rarely participated in Baiyujing's discussions. The Huang Jieshuo who was very rare in the past and left a sentence that caused a lot of shock in Baiyujing, the general meaning of the old man was to make way for the scholar Qi Jingchen. Now both sisters are not only in the Ascension realm, but also on the list of 10 candidates. When they saw this young but legendary old scholar, they bowed their heads and called him Mr. Wensheng. Although there are 2 worlds, there is never a secret on the top of the mountain. The eldest disciple Xiaohu Chuiyu, and the closed disciple Qi Jingchen in his early years need not talk about it. Right and left, it is rumored that this person practiced swords very late, but he practiced a mighty swordsmanship in the world, which made the genius of the Middle-earth divine continent directly become a derogatory term. Lu Shilu, who was wearing a tiger-headed hat before, asked Baiyujing to punch out, dragged the handsome boy and ran away after the punch. The really invincible man was clearly in Baiyujing at the time, but he didn't fight back. They each have their own curiosity and questions. Obviously, congratulations to you Shen Dao is second, and it is true to chat with Wensheng a few more words. The female cultivator Thunderstorm has a strong body and is full of muscular lines, but instead of giving people a rough look, it has a rare beauty. She took the lead and asked with a smile, Mr. Wensheng, your student Lu Shilu who asked Quan Baiyujing before made a lot of noise. At that time he was accompanied by a boy with a strange hat. Is he really the most proud of the world? The world knows that Bai Yesher is invincible, and his swordsmanship is even more outstanding. If it weren't for Bai and not a pure sword cultivator, I'm afraid a few worshippers in the world would be blind. As long as Bai Yi is willing to go to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, he will definitely be able to compete with Chen Qingdu. The old Xiaoxia looked blank. Huh? The last time Xuandu watched Farewell, I remember that Bai Yi was still a child with a tiger's head hat carved in pink and jade. Yang Qing smiled knowingly. Previously, Lu Shilu and Bai had also visited the Shoshan Pavilion and had a short rest at her Haishan Immortal Pavilion. It's just that this kind of thing shouldn't be publicized. Otherwise, like Lei Yu, she may be puzzled by this matter. Bai is so amazing, whether she looks like a child or a teenager, why would she wear a funny tiger hat? But that Lu Shilius relationship with Bai Yi is indeed good. It's just that after they got up to say goodbye, when Lu Shilu went out, he was still helping that one. Bai Yi also supported the tiger's hat. To this day she still finds it interesting. Lei Yu said in a bold tone, "Welcome Mr. Wensheng to my boat tip in Kongshan Lake. There is enough wine and water so you don't have to worry about eating and drinking. There are also some books in the collection. I heard that this well-known Mr. Wensheng is the best in the world in asking wine. Coincidentally, the wine brewed by Kongshan Lake is not inferior to any immortal brew in Qingming world." The old scholar laughed and said, "If you want to go, you naturally want to go. I have been fascinated by that empty mountain and lake for a long time, but your headmaster you may not welcome it." She grinned, "Wensheng, just go, Baiyujing has nothing to do with our little 4 states. Regardless of whether the rumor on the mountain is true or not, for thousands of years, the invincible one has indeed never set foot on the empty mountain lake once. It seems that there is indeed some kind of prohibition." The old scholar thanked the woman who Jun Su Mian said softly, "Mr. Wensheng, there are many people in our Qingming world who sincerely admire Chen Yingguan. It can be said that there are countless people. This is really not a scene. These Qingming monks who have many praises for young hidden officials, have one thing in common, most of them are disgusted with Baiyujing. It is said that in her green mud cave, there are not many Qi practitioners. For thousands of years, due to the closure of the mountain, there have only been occasional monks from the upper 5 realms who traveled to the 14 states, selected the cultivator embryos and brought them back to the cave. As for my sister Su Yingzhen's blessed land, she was in a similar situation, but she knew a lot about the major events that happened in the outside world." Su Yingyu smiled and said, "Unlike my elder sister among the younger generation, I still prefer Chao Ci." The old scholar nodded with a smile. Chao Ci is a young man who can deserve any praise. Indeed, Chao Ci is the kind of person who is typical of him, who has no competition with the world, and the world can't compete with him for anything. Therefore people like Chao Ci may not even be jealous. Besides, the world thinks highly of Chao Ci, but isn't it just his own closed disciple? Su Mian hesitated for a moment and asked in a heartfelt voice, "Mr. Wensheng, can I help my friend and Chen Yingguan get a few seals and a folding fan? If I can, it'll be a shame to ask for 2 more seals." The old xianxia stroked his beard and smiled. If it was the kind of creating something out of nothing, and adding a friend out of thin air, the old xianxia, who was a gentleman, really didn't dare to take it all down. Last time at the Dali Jingqing Inn, the closed disciple lost his temper with the self-defeating gentleman. That is Qin Pingan. If you change it to Zhuozhuo and Junqian, you can try it and the brain will be swollen. Su Mian is so exquisite and understanding. She immediately smiled and said, Mr. Wensheng is fine if he is in trouble. The old xianxia said, I don't dare to pat my chest to promise anything. I will turn around and tell the students I think there is no problem. Su Mian and the old xianxia thanked him with all manners of manners and a blessing. Afterwards, several Taoist priests from outside Baiyujing came here to congratulate Yu Xian. Sword of Coming Chapter 1033. When he was full, Zhao Shuxia cleaned up the dishes and Ning Ji moved away from the small table. The bright moon is in the sky, the moonlight fills the world like a glass world, the night air is fresh and the wind is cool through the clothes. At this time the mood is at this time of the day. There were 3 chairs side by side under the eaves, and the old scholar sat in the middle with Erlang's legs raised, his hands patted on his knees, humming a folk song, and a gentle breeze brushed the old man's snow-white temples. Qin Pingan lightly shook the fan. On Mr. S' side, whether it was drinking or chatting, Qin Pingan didn't sit upright like his senior brother, nor was he as sullen as senior brother Jun Qian. Lu Qin put his arms around his sleeves, leaned against the back of the chair, stretched his legs and had a leisurely attitude. All the affairs of the world and the housework, the affairs of the sky and the affairs at hand, all the grievances temporarily rested. They talked casually about the Confucian Temple's seal of the 5 sacred mountains of Beipingzu and the granting of the divine title. According to the old scholar, it was a little troublesome. Because of the rank of Yizhou Mountain, there is no distinction between superior and inferior. To say that the Confucian Temple a certain sage is dispatched to preside over the enshrining ceremony alone, so the order in which the 5 sacred ceremony will be held is not a small problem, but if it is to be carried out at the same time, it is also difficult to dispatch 5 sages to accompany the Confucian Temple. After all, now that the business is heavy, the Confucian Temple can't recruit so many Confucian saints for a while, and it needs to come to Aquarius at the same time. After all, it is officialdom and it is the same up and down the mountain. At the foot of the mountain, the court gave purple cassocks to Buddhist dragons and elephants, and titles to Daomen real people or emperors, and the Ministry of Rites to seal the gods of mountains and rivers. There is a set of rituals. Since ancient times, fame and fortune are not separated, and there is no difference between widowhood and unevenness. Therefore, it is difficult for the Confucian Temple to have a bowl of water that is balanced, and it is necessary to give all the Shanjun face without losing anyone's face. To say that the 5 Confucian academies and abbots to seal the ceremony is a little bit insufficient, and the etiquette seems to be light. But to say that a certain sage used the avatar method, it is a bit outrageous after all, and it also seems that the Confucian Temple does not pay enough attention. After all, Shanjun won the god title, just like the old xianxia teased Yu Xian in the sky before. Some happy events, compared to it, is even more rare to be the bridegroom officer. It is destined to be only once. Everyone wants to do it grandly and grandly. Of course, there are also the literary saints of old scholars. Qin Pingan said, then he'll go back and discuss with Wei Bo and persuade me a few words. Perhaps the matter of the divine name is the opportunity for Wei Boji to go further. If the gods of mountains and waters want to improve the height of the golden body of the gods of temples, unlike Qi practitioners who have so many mountain climbing paths, the only way to go is to accumulate merit and refine incense. Lu Qin smiled and said, this is called the power of heaven and earth. Wei Bo was the first mountain monarch of the Xinshui kingdom in the past. After the country was broken, his golden body was smashed and sank into the bottom of the Sanjiang River near Hangzhou town. Later, a woman salvaged part of his golden body. Wei Bo has survived since then. Become a lonely ghost, wandering around the old site of ancestral temples, and when the land of the Song dynasty continues to expand southward, he will take the embroidery, jade and the 3 rivers into the bag, and he will know the identity and history of Wei Bo. The Li imperial court only made him the land master of Chiduan Mountain. Looking back now, it is more like a deliberate move by the Li Song clan. First, he climbed to the sky in one step, became the master of Piyun Mountain, became the new Beiwa Mountain monarch of Dali, and then became one of the Yizhou Mountain monarchs. The height of the pure golden body also rose from the Jade Pure realm to the immortal realm. Now, there is the gift of Ningyao from the colorful world, and then the title of the Confucian Temple and the divine title, as well as the help of the Dali court, then Wei Bas, Lianzhong Xuanhuan, in the history of Aquarius is bound to win. The old scholar stroked his beard and smiled. A living treasure, our fellow Taoist Lingjun, is really a living treasure. As the old saying goes, if there is an old man in the family, there is a treasure, and it is indeed a must for Luopa Mountain to have such a boy in Tsingyi who likes to pat people on the shoulder. Before Qin Pingan saw Mr. S' picture of the extraterrestrial time tonight, he actually only knew that Qin Lingjun had seen the patriarch of the three sects, met in the small town, chatted and did everything, and it was all cloudy and foggy. Because Qin Lingjun was in an unspeakable mysterious state after the event, even if he wanted to mention the word Daozu to others he couldn't do it, so Qin Pingan didn't know the specific process, and he wouldn't try to get to the bottom of it. However, with Qin Lingjun's consistent style, Qin Pingan can still guess a few points in general. But only talking about hospitality with the old master, the old scholar laughed and said, "Master Lu, do you dare to meet Jing Juzhong face to face and call him nephew Jing Shi?" Lu Qin hurriedly reached out and touched the lotus crown, overwhelmed with shock. One piece and one piece constantly, cutting the world. All the two pieces on the chessboard are connected with each other in various contexts, so many pieces seem to be inseparable from Qin Pingan for the time being. There is Su Mian who asked Wen Sheng for seals and fans, and Wang Yuanlu, Zhang Fenghai etc. In the end, Lao Guanzhu made no secret of his gloating, and even made the piece full of monks' names, mountain-top sects etc. The chessboard of the chess pieces stood up, and suddenly the whole chessboard was like a wall, blocking Lu Chen's eyes. The old master still had a leisurely interest and asked Lu Chen if it was like a wall full of poems and looked disgusting. Scabies? So Lu Chen said something that Qin Pingan couldn't figure out why. If you followed the plan of senior brother Chuiyu, you could have perfected a swordsmanship, and this path might be your way to enter the 14th realm. The way of union. Qin Pingan said, anything you want to do has a reward or a price. One cannot easily forgive oneself. Lu Chen smiled and said, you can't forgive me either. Qin Pingan said angrily, I have been away from Shujin Lake for a long time. Lu Chen smiled, Taoism talks about heaven and earth, Buddhism talks about world and world, one time and one geography. If you say that, it means that it is not far from Shujin Lake, maybe it has been a long time and you have gone farther? Or it may come closer, who knows, it may be very far away and suddenly very close. Qin Pingan said with a smile, since Lu Zhang taught himself that we are friends, then I persuade you to read me a little better. Lu Qin nodded vigorously, clasped his hands together and said solemnly, I only hope that the hearts of the world are the book Jianghu of today. Then Lu Qin said to himself, it is estimated that Palace Master Wu is similar to my uncle, and there is more than one way to get along. Qin Pingan held his breath but didn't talk. Lu Qin and Bai Yujing, you can just guess what you are, and I, Qin Pingan and Luo Pashan, just protect the road. Unknowingly, the straw shoe boy in the mud bottle alley gradually became the mountain owner, elder, and hidden official in the minds of many people. In the past, the children who walked from the Great Wall of Sword Chi to Hanging Mountain, scattered all over Howran, except for the masters and sects carefully selected by the young hidden officials for them, and the second shopkeeper who already has two sects, one up the mountain and the other, are these children. An invisible backer, the name of the Great Wall of Sword Chi is their biggest talisman. I am afraid this is also the root cause of why Qin Pingan's half of the Great Wall of Sword Chi has not been refined. The Feishing city in the colorful world has Qin Pingan, a close disciple of the literary sage here. In the future, some big things will happen. The Confucian temple is half of their parents' home. For example, in a certain city, there is an unknown Taoist temple under the jurisdiction of a Zhiga palace, and there is an unknown small Taoist temple called Lingxian Temple. For many years in the military book, he only practiced with Taoist companions, and he did not compete with the world and did not care about the world. He never went out to leave the realm of Fengmaguan, but only occasionally visited the realm around the Taoist temple, holding a Lingsho wooden walking stick from Guoshan. Walking alone on the white road in the clouds. This person is just the opposite of that Huanjing. The invincible hand of the same generation, what kind of realm did the invincible hand reach? Even if later generations read the historical book, they all think that it is because there is no one in the same generation, so this is the case. Only one person can win so many battles, and every time it's ridiculously easy. Lu Qin stretched his waist and stopped under a tree by the river. I envy some people they meet by chance. They don't need to be famous, just like a few words they can live and die. Qin Pingan asked, "What's the point of talking to me about these faraway things?" Lu Qin said seriously, "Why don't you know that it's not something that's right in front of you?" Qin Pingan asked with a smile, "Is it right in front of you? Why don't I know it myself?" Lu Qin said, "That's right." After that, he was speechless all the way, walked away from the school and then returned the same way. The scholar of the human landscape school. Kinking Y shade bright moonlight. When the spring breeze blows, all the flowers compete for beauty. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.